This story was told to me by my uncle's friend, something he experienced while he was walking home drunk from Gallup to Zuni. So he said this happened back in the early 90s when he was a lot younger. He decided to go party in Gallup with his friends. He didn't have a care in the world because he got into an argument with his woman early that day. As he partied into the night, his woman was looking for him all over town till she found him at a local bar. They had an argument as they left town. At some point, he got fed up and got out the car, so he pulled out the drama card and said that he was going to go walking home. His woman, being mad at him, left him in the middle of a dark road. He said it was somewhere between Gallup and the Mustang gas station on 602. He said it was called something else, but I can't remember the name that he said. He said he began to walk, and after a while, he felt like someone was following him. At one point he heard people laughing in the trees. He assumed it was just the locals partying in the distance. When he got close to the Mustang gas station around 11, he noticed a single cab truck creeping up behind him. As they pulled up, he noticed it was two guys that he knew back home. They started asking him if he needed a ride. Without hesitating, he hopped in between both of them. He felt comfortable because he knew the two passengers that were in the truck, and they asked him if he wanted a drink with them. So he did. All three of them drove down drinking, not thinking anything strange. He was having a so-called good time, forgetting about reality and all his issues and all his problems, talking, cracking jokes and everything. As they approached the rest line, they took a dirt road to one of the Nutria lakes. When they got to one of the lakes, they parked the truck. The driver and the passenger offered him more beer, and they asked him why he was walking. So he told them his story and everything that was going on. As a side note, this is never a good idea. Men, and women too. If you're ever having a hard time with your spouse or anybody else, never talk to strangers or people about your problems at home. So he said they were sitting out there for a couple of hours till they finished their drinks. When all the drinks were gone, that's when he started feeling a bit tipsy. As they were sitting there talking, the passenger out of nowhere asked him if he believed in Yenagloshi. He sort of laughed because it was so random, and then he said, "I'm not sure. Why?" Then both of them started laughing, looking at each other. It was an awkward silence. The passenger then continued, "Do you think spirits can follow you home if you're drunk?" At this point he said that he started feeling uncomfortable, and he said that he just wanted to be dropped off. The driver and passenger just continued to laugh, and then they asked him if he was scared. He said no. The passenger then responded with, "Well, that's good." Then both of them started singing, and that's when he got scared. The driver continued to sing louder and faster. All of a sudden, he started to feel the passenger put his arm on his shoulder. That's when he started smelling the odor of dead animal flesh, and he saw the passenger's eyes wide open, and he started growling like a dog at him. He was in total shock that he couldn't move. The driver kept singing. Then, he too started growling, just as the passenger. He said they were both laughing at him. He said the passenger started banging on the window, on the dashboard, shaking, and just laughing and singing, a mixture of everything. He said he wanted to get out, but he didn't know what to do. He started looking around in the state of panic that he was in, and he noticed that the window in the back had one of those things to open. He said he doesn't know how he got out of there. He remembered that he slid the window open and squeezed himself out the back. He felt the car rock back and forth, and he could still hear them laughing, singing, growling while he was trying to escape. As he got out the truck, he ran down the dirt road, running as fast as he could. At that moment, he heard both truck doors slam shut. That's when he started hearing heavy footsteps behind him, and then that growling, running after him. He said he knew he was being chased. He just kept running while they were after him, laughing as well. He ran so fast that he heard the two laughing at him in the distance, mocking him. He got a little tired at some point, and he slowed down, but then he would hear the two come after him again, and so he kept running until he, quote unquote, lost them, and he was able to get on the main road. As he started walking on the main road, that's when he felt a sense of relief when he saw a car pulling up behind him. So much for that. He said it was them. So he started running again as they followed behind him, honking the truck and laughing at him. He thought he was gonna die that night, but then they just drove off as another car was coming in the opposite way. He flagged the other car down desperately. As it stopped, he hopped in. The driver of the car was sort of afraid of him, but seeing how scared he was, he knew that he needed help. He told me that he didn't leave his house for at least a few weeks after that, very afraid that he might run into those two people again. After that incident, he was so traumatized that he stopped drinking. Plus, he never saw those guys again. I would think twice before drinking. That was the story he told me, and he also warned me to be careful on who I hang out with. I do get the chills just thinking about what he went through. I guess the real question that I have, were they real? Or were they just pretenders? I have a story my dad would tell us every few years. It's about a skinwalker. This happened in coal mine, south of Tuba City in Arizona. I'm not sure when it happened, but from the way my dad told it, I'm guessing my dad was still a teenager, so maybe around the 60s. Back then, not too many people owned vehicles on the res. People still traveled by horses, and maybe your closest neighbor lived miles away from you, and if you were lucky, only family lived nearby. This was my dad's cousin, who was riding his horse to where my dad and his family lived at. It was towards the evening, and it was getting dark. There he was going along, when all of a sudden, he gets a feeling of being followed, someone behind him. So for a few times he stops his horse and listens. Nothing. Just the sound of bushes blowing, so he just continues on. A few minutes later, again, and I'm not sure about you, and I know this was back in the day, but even now just walking around here, so I can just imagine back then. So my dad said that his cousin gets the horse to go a bit faster, because he's getting nervous and scared. Plus, the horse starts acting up as well, and it starts wanting to go faster, like if it just wanted to get away. But he pulls back on the reins. By now the horse is ready pulling to go, and then that's when he starts to hear whistling. At that moment, the horse right then takes off. The whistling gets louder, but he still can't see what it is. Then he starts to hear a set of footsteps, lighter, faster, almost like someone was running really fast. He looks down and sees something running beside him, and it starts trying to reach for the reins. It was dark, in general, but whatever this thing was now closer to him, and that's when he could see somewhat like feathers tied to whatever the shadow thing was. From that point on, he just let go of the horse, and then it just ran loose. He just held on. I'm not sure how many miles he was chased, but as soon as he got to my dad and mom's house, he was greeted by the barking dogs, and then he jumped off the horse and ran into the hogan, screaming, and the dogs barking. His cousin came running in. From there, all they could see and hear were the dogs barking in the distance. It sounds like they were after somebody or something. After that night, my dad's cousin didn't go out alone after dark anymore. Well, that's what my dad said. Not even to go check on the livestock, the sheep, or anything. And even though he had to travel, it was now only in the daytime. He never talked much about what he saw. The next morning, my dad said he found a horse down by the canyon. It was all bruised up, and he said that the horse looked very scared as well. They never did figure out what it was, but my dad did say that the dogs would bark every few nights from that day. Also, I know we're not supposed to whistle at night, so I'm pretty sure that's why they tell us not to do anything, because that's how these things communicate, by whistling. I have lived my entire life in Oklahoma, and it's probably exactly how you think it is. Outside of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma is mostly small towns, casinos and lots of, and I mean a lot of them, woods and open plains. There's backcountry galore. It's usually pretty quiet everywhere you go, and people are generally friendly. We're the definition of a flyover state. If there's one thing people immediately relate to Oklahoma, it's our Native American, or Indian American heritage, the folklore that comes with it as well. While the stuff isn't really prevalent in the bigger cities at all, it becomes more prominent as you enter certain parts of the state. For those curious, I'm not sure how much land is still legally considered native, but it's most likely more than any other state. This incident that I'm going to talk about happened in the summer of 2011 at a scout camp not too far from the Oklahoma-Texas border. This was the last trip that I ever made out there, and I don't regret it. Camp is from Sunday through Saturday, 1 week. You arrive on Sunday, you work on merit badges Monday through Thursday, you chill on Friday, and then you leave on that Saturday. Now, the leaders of my troop were mostly one family, whom I will call the Perkins. There was the great-grandfather Chuck, the grandfather Daryl, and the grandson Buck. Chuck was about 75 when I joined, and he fit the typical old man stereotype like a glove. He was abrasive, impatient, and quick to lose his temper, while at the same time he was happy to help out any boy that wasn't asking stupid questions. Chuck was also a war veteran, I'm not sure which war though. Daryl was a lot like his father, except, I'm not sure. Maybe cryptic is the best word, I guess. What I'm trying to say is that you could tell that Daryl had seen some shit. He was a little out there, very my way or the highway type. He was around 60-ish, but he was built like a bear. The man was massive and intimidating, and he knew this as well. To this day, I think Daryl knows a hell of a lot more about this incident than he'll ever tell, but I never had the courage to ask him about it. Buck, the grandson, was a year older than me. Buck was a little bit hard-headed, but he was tough and built just like his granddad. He was also loyal like a golden retriever. The word fear wasn't exactly in his rather vocabulary, but I would say otherwise. Another key player was my best friend at that time, Dylan. Dylan was stubborn, headstrong, and always looking for trouble. He and I had started scouts together at 6, and we were the only two that had stuck together since that time. We were always together, which maybe saved our lives that night. Now, I was the opposite of Dylan. I was a bit meek, easily scared, and suffer from constitutional delay, which means that I looked like I was 10, even though I was actually 15. So anyways, we had been going to the scout camp for as long as I had been involved with the troop. Every summer, always in June or July, we would make our week trip down there and then go back home. Dylan and I knew what the camp was supposed to feel and sound like, as did Chuck and Daryl, who had been going there for about 20 odd years or so. This year though, we immediately knew something was off. Have you ever walked into a place that you know very well and just felt like bad vibes? Like if bad energy was taking up residence somewhere. It was kind of like that the moment that we drove through the gates. The younger boys seemed pretty oblivious, but I knew Dylan felt it, like I did. And Daryl, man, I don't think I ever seen Daryl as tense as he was the whole week. He was normally pretty chillax, if a little strict, but he was on edge the moment that we arrived on the grounds until we left on Saturday. I suppose the best way to do this from here on out is to give a chronological account of events that happened day to day over the whole week. This is the only way I think I can do this without losing myself, and you all as well. The first thing you do when arriving at camp is to drive to the registration office to confirm campsites, the number of boys and leaders, and everything else. We did all this, But Daryl was gone for a very long time. When he came back, he was being escorted by a camp ranger. As Daryl was hopping back into the car, I remember hearing the ranger say something along the lines of, "Just let me know ASAP if anything happens." While this isn't strange to hear or say, looking back, I do wonder if it held a deeper meaning. Our campsite was towards the northeast of the camp, down in this tiny valley surrounded by a rock outcropping on the north and on the south. The north rock outcroppings were split from east to west, and it created what we called a storm shelter, basically this little crease that we would hide in if severe weather ever sprang up. I was assigned to check up on it to make sure it was clear of debris and stuff before the week started, so I go walk around the shelter. When I do, I'm slammed with this awful smell. I knew it was something dead. Once I got down there, I saw that it wasn't something big, but rather a bunch of small animals in piles, birds, foxes, raccoons, and parts of a deer. There were a ton of dead, mutilated bodies back there. I nearly puked. It smelled so bad. The heat also wasn't helping. Alarm bells were not ringing yet, but I was definitely weirded out. I told Daryl about it, and he said that he was going to have a look and clean it up. And then I just forgot about it. Our campsite was basically set up as one giant semicircle. The tents were almost formed in like a ring. We spent very little time at our campsite as we were all out and about working on merit badges. Also at the mess hall, climbing area, shooting range, lake, and some other places. There was no reason for any boy to be in camp, and it was rare to find one who wanted to stay in camp. Dylan and I stuck together most evenings, and Monday night, we decided to go shoot. Or rather, Dylan decided to shoot. I was a terrible shot, and I didn't want to pay for ammo that I would end up wasting. We were about halfway to the range when he realized that he had forgotten his money, so we turned around and headed back towards the camp. When we got there, it was empty as expected, but we noticed that one of the tent flaps had been left open. This was a big issue. Daryl was always on us to keep our flaps shut to keep any curious woodland animals or insects out of our tents. So I walked over there to zip it up. That's when I realized that it was still zipped. The door had simply been ripped open. The tent had been ransacked. The sleeping bags were shredded. The trunks flipped over, and the supplies had been gone through. It was a wreck. I called Dylan over, and our conversation went something like, "Fuck man, who would do this?" I don't know. It wasn't one of our boys. Daryl would make sure that he would never see the light of day again. Should we tell him? Do you want to have your head chopped off? Let him find it for himself. This was a stupid decision in hindsight. We should have found Daryl and told him immediately, but since we didn't want to suffer his wrath, we didn't. We got back to camp that night, and everyone was on edge. All the younger boys were freaking out, whispering about Bigfoot. Daryl told us that for the rest of the week, we all had to be back at camp before sundown, which I thought was kind of pointless, because the tent had been ransacked during the day, but whatever. Tuesday was actually pretty eventful. All I recall is that some boys a couple campsites over from ours got scared because they heard noises in and around their campsite that night. If I'm being honest, that could have been anything. There's an awful lot of animal life out here in Oklahoma, and it's pretty common for new or amateur scouts to draw raccoons, foxes, and sometimes bigger things into camp by leaving food out at night. But I do still wonder if anything going on was related to my other experience that week. Wednesday was different. The bad vibes seemed to be getting stronger, or maybe it was just me getting more worked up. I'm not sure. What I do know is that the mess hall had been broken into the night before, torn up and everything. The food had been half eaten. Supplies were thrown everywhere. At least that's what I heard. We weren't even allowed up to the mess hall until dinner that night, by which time the camp had cleaned everything up. Of course, everyone was on edge now. There were so many things being said. Some of them were saying Did you hear they found some homeless guy camping out on the other side of the lake? Someone else would say, Tom found some really weird footprints outside his own tent last night. Did you see them? I heard some weird mating call last night. Did anyone else? I could have sworn I was being stalked walking back to camp last night. Does anyone else feel that same way? There was one that stuck out to me after the week was over, and the only reason it did is because it reminded me of my experience on Sunday. I found a dead raccoon outside my tent last night. It was like mutilated and fucked up. Which one of you guys thought it would be funny? Outside of all of this, Wednesday was fairly uneventful too. Just really tense. Thursday. Holy shit. Thursday night, the camp would always hold this party thing out by the main gate to sort of celebrate the hard work that everyone had put in over the week. There would be a bonfire, a chuck wagon, basically a canteen on wheels, stories and songs, and lots of Boy Scout stuff, you know. Daryl was super against letting anyone in the troop go. He wanted to keep every boy in the camp that night, but after listening to 12 and 13-year-olds whine and cry for 30 minutes, he eventually let them go, as long as they were escorted by the older boys. So Buck, Dylan, and I were pretty much responsible for 15 middle schoolers. Daryl said he had a meeting to go to, which I knew was a lie. Scoutmaster meetings were always held in the mornings, never at night. But what the hell? So the three of us started walking down there, when I realized that we had left the flashlights back at the camp, and we only had 5 minutes of light left. I told Dylan and Buck to go on ahead of me, but both of them insisted on coming. In the end, Buck escorted the kids to the bonfire, while Dylan and I went back to the camp. Now that was a mistake, for a few reasons. We had only been gone for about 10 minutes, which means it was almost dark once we got back. But our camp, everything had been torn down. The tents and their contents were thrown everywhere. Food was out and scattered. It was a complete mess. Alarm bells were basically screaming now. Code red, get the fuck out of there right now. But Dylan was already into the camp before I could stop him. That's when the smell hit us. The smell of dead, decaying stuff. But this time, it was mixed with something else. Kinda like spoiled milk. I'm not sure how to describe it. It's not the typical burnt copper blood scent that a lot of people say is related to the goat man. I know what that smells like. This was something else. Dylan and I both agreed that we needed to find Daryl ASAP. Fate was on our side that night, because not a second later, he rushed into the camp in full commando mode. I'm talking giant knife on his hip, brandishing a pistol. Sorry, I don't know what kind of gun it was. I don't even know anything about guns. And also the biggest flashlight that I had ever seen. Dylan and I started asking Daryl about what was going on, begging for answers. He then told us to shut the fuck up, in the harshest but most quiet voice that I ever heard. That's when I noticed his face for the first time, and a massive bruise on the left side of his face. It looked like he had picked a fight and lost. Let me just remind you that Daryl is 6'7" and 260 pounds. He was pretty much pure muscle. Whatever got the upper hand on him was strong. The conversation with Daryl went something like, "Where the hell are the kids?" "The bonfire, sir." "What the fuck are you two doing back here?" "We forgot the flashlight, sir." "Alright, here's what's gonna happen. Dylan, I'm gonna give you this knife. And you, go get those flashlights you were talking about and point them towards the storm shelter. I'm going over there. If anything but me comes out, you two run like hell. You got that?" We nodded, and off he went. He rounded a corner into the shelter. That's when we heard the noise. Have you ever heard someone trying to talk while choking on their own blood? Something like that. That's what it sounded like, with a mix of low growling. Dylan and I stood there frozen for what felt like hours, but was most likely like 5 minutes, when the noise stopped and Daryl returned, pale as a sheet, but in one piece. Daryl then escorted us there and refused to answer any of our questions. or tell us anything about what just happened. All he said was, "I don't think we'll have to worry about anything for the rest of the week." So we went to the bonfire. But Dylan and I kept to ourselves and tried to figure out what the hell was going on. When we got back to camp, we did our best to repair as much as we could in the dark. Dylan and I didn't sleep at all that night. We were wide awake, and what must have been around midnight, I heard a few noises outside. I saw a flashlight beam waving around before finally coming to a still, pointed towards the storm shelter. I poked my head out of my tent, and I saw Daryl sitting in a chair, flashlight pointed at the storm shelter, watching and waiting. I watched Daryl all night. Friday morning, I finally got some answers. Around then, Chuck came out of his tent and proceeded to have a not exactly quiet conversation with Daryl. Now bear with me, as I'm remembering all this from memory. Some bits may not be entirely accurate. Chuck asked, "Is there anything new?" Daryl responded, "No, I've been out here all night." Chuck responded, "I still think you're wrong. They never come this far south, especially this time of year. It must have been something else." Daryl then said, "I know what I saw, Dad. I'm telling you, you're getting more bold, more desperate." Chuck then said, "Well, I'm heading to the mess hall right now. I need my coffee. Do you want anything?" Then they talked about breakfast for a while, and Chuck eventually left. I figured if I wanted any sort of answers to last night, now was my chance to ask Daryl to talk alone. So I approached Daryl, and before I could say anything, he turned around, and he gave me a look that stopped me in my tracks. He says, "Come sit." So I sat next to him, and this is all I get out of him. "You were pretty brave last night, kid. Incredibly stupid, but brave. What did you see?" I then said, "Nothing, sir." He just responded with a, He was quiet for a good 5 minutes, and I finally mustered up the courage to ask him, "What the hell is going on, sir?" He then said, "How old are you?" "I'm 15, I said. "Son, the world is a far darker place than you know. Right now, you're too young. Let me give you some advice that you have to keep in your head at times like this. Don't ask questions that you don't want to know the answer to, or that you already know the answer to." Do I know the answer to this question, sir?" "It wasn't natural, was it?" I asked. "That depends on your definition of natural, son. To me, that thing that's been here with us all week is natural as any other creature in these woods and on this earth. It's simply just the darker side of nature, one that usually stays away from heavy traffic areas like this. They don't really like people, especially in big groups." "Then what's it doing here, sir?" "Honestly, I don't know. I think it got confused, maybe even lost. But for now, I don't think it'll come back while we're here." Dylan then woke up about then, and so did the rest of the camp, so our conversation was cut short. The rest of Friday was pretty uneventful. Dylan, Buck, and I piddled around camp for a while, talking about what we thought it was, or rather, Buck and I did. Dylan didn't really talk about it, and he started acting really irritated as the day went on. Friday night, all was well. I slept good. I had bad dreams, but I still slept. Saturday, we were off at about 6:30 that morning to tear down the camp. I was ready to leave. Even though Daryl had been reassuring Friday morning, I could tell he was eager to leave. He was tense and would often stop to look towards the storm shelter. About 11:30, Daryl asked me to check the shelter area and also clean it up with him, even though no one had used it that week. We got there, and it was completely different than what I seen Sunday. It had been clean, spotless, and something similar to a sigil. It looked like a circle with 2 arrows pointing towards a dot in the center had been marked on each side of the canyon walls. I assume it's Native American, but I'm not sure what it means. and I have never really cared to find out. We left about noon, and I never gone back. So that's my big story, the one that I can't explain. I know for a fact that Daryl knew way more than he was letting on. I think Buck knew more than I did too, but he clammed up whenever I tried to talk to him about it. I think whatever it was must have been something with Native American, given the symbol, but I'm still not sure what it was. Have you ever had a creepy experience with dolls? What about Kachina dolls? Or just dolls in general? Have you heard about them? I was told that my tribe used to do a death ceremony way before my time. My grandpa said they would make some dolls for the ceremony. I do think dolls are those things that people can use for evil as well, since, some dolls are made with real human hair or other things. So I'm pretty sure some dolls have quote-unquote things trapped inside of them. My mom told me the story some time ago. She said that when she was little, her and her siblings lived with my grandma and her family in Phoenix. And she said they had bought some human-like dolls from a lady. My mom said that the lady was throwing them away, but my grandma decided that my mom and my auntie would want a doll because they had complained several times that they were bored. So my grandma ended up buying them. My mom said that the dolls were actually really pretty and fun to play with as well. But one night, they didn't play with them. Something about them getting mad. My mom and auntie, that is. So when they were sleeping on the floor in their room, my mom, who was a light sleeper, she said she saw one of the dolls get up, and it started talking and pointing to her. Then, they started walking around. So my mom got scared and nudged at my auntie. With her eyes, she told her to look up. My mom said that my auntie went into full panic mode. She jumped up and ran towards my grandma's room and left my mom alone with the dolls. But she said that when my auntie ran out the room, the dolls also ran after her. All she remembers is a bunch of noise going on, and my grandma got them and threw them in a bag and put them in some sort of garbage can. The next day they went to visit a medicine man nearby, and he said that the dolls had evil spirits trapped inside of them and that they wanted attention. So the medicine man requested them. My mom said that they went back home and they couldn't find the dolls no more. However, when they went into the room, the dolls were there, just sitting on the bed. My grandma grabbed the dolls, put them in a trash bag, and gave them to the medicine man. I know these were not Kachina dolls, but what do you think? Have you ever had a creepy experience with any type of doll? One of my coworkers told me that her uncle and some of his friends were coming back from Rapid one evening, just before dark. The sun had set right as they got to Red Shirt Hill. They were almost to the scenic overlook when they saw a little boy walking along the road. He had no shirt or shoes, and it was actually pretty chilly. They started to slow down when the boy turned around and saw them. He ran down into the ditch and squatted, as if trying to hide. They moved the car along to where he sat. When they finally saw him hiding in the tall grass, they asked if he was alright or if he needed help, only his scared face showing above the grass. One of the men said that he was going to go take a look at him, and he opened the car door. As soon as he had 1 foot outside of the car, the little boy stood up. He started growing taller, but not just like a human, a long black shadow. The man screamed and floored it up the road. The passengers in the backseat were yelling, "Go faster, hurry." The uncle looked in the rearview mirror and saw that the boy had grown into a tall, long shadow. Not only this, but it seemed to be running behind them, keeping up with the speed of the car. He pushed the car for all it was worth, making it to the top of the scenic overlook and hitting the straightaway. One of the back passengers said that he was gone, but still, they flew back home. Finally, they stopped in Oglala. The uncle asked where the thing went, and his friend told him that when they got to the top of the overlook, it stopped, and then it turned and went down into the Badlands. And this is exactly why I personally never drive around that area at night. We are Wenatchee Yakama. My grandfather moved to Portland, but he still stayed pretty traditional. He always said that there were spirits everywhere and everything, and not to mention his house was full of rocks and shells and a bunch of other natural things. It reminds me a lot of that one movie, but he didn't keep antiques and stuff like that. It was just natural things. And just like those two people, he had a room that was full of this stuff. The door to that room was painted black. The story is that the room was shared by two, or maybe it was three of my aunties when they were in high school, and one of them came home from school with a can of black paint, and she painted the whole room black. My grandparents quickly ended up painting it with some brown trim and tan paint. They left the door all black. I forgot to mention, I was raised by them. I never did end up meeting my mom or dad. Maybe one day I will. Anyways, my cousins and me would play a game. We would dare each other to stay alone in the room with the black door, just because we knew our grandpa didn't really like people going in there. But you know how young teenagers can be. Now, like I said, the room was used for storage and was full of all kinds of interesting. We loved looking at all the things that he collected. We were always in there together. I never liked going in there alone. If you were alone in the room, you got very uncomfortable quickly. There would be some sort of ringing, buzzing in your head. I would start shaking, sweating, and get scared. The kind that you feel that something terrible was in that room. So this game we used to play, we would try to see who could spend the most time inside of that room by themselves. To add to it, we would say that the person had to stand by the window, facing away from the room. And we all felt strange going into that room, but that was the whole point of the game. Finally, when you couldn't stand it anymore, we came up with a safe word, which was to shout out to the rest of us who were waiting outside the door. But not just shout, it had to be something different. Like, has grandma had lunch yet? Not the screaming that goes, get me out, or stop it. So after they would say the safe word, we would swing the door open. The whole point of this is to not have our grandparents suspect anything of what we were doing. There was always this creepy feeling that the fear came from one of the things inside. There was something in the corner of the room. It was different from everything else. Something none of us ever messed with. It was a taxidermy animal, with the eyes missing. It looked like some sort of bird, like an owl. Creepy as fuck if you ask me. Not to mention, it looked pretty fucked up as well. It didn't look right. But like I said, my grandfather had rocks and sticks and some bird nests and other natural things all over the rest of the house. But this thing was sitting on a table, leaning in the corner that was across from the window, on the same wall as the door, but in the far corner of it. Even though we liked sorting through all of this old stuff in the trunks and boxes in the rest of the room, we never got close to it. I think we all knew something was up with that. I did ask my grandpa about it one time. Now, my grandpa was a very nice guy. He was always happy, laid back. But when I asked him about it, he snapped at me and said to never touch that. I asked why, and he wouldn't answer. But I do remember him getting very upset. So one day when my cousins came over for summer, they would get dropped off at our house. Looking back, my aunts and uncles most likely felt bad for me, and they wanted me to have good company. So when they got here, we would always dare each other to play, except this time it was on me, as I had lost and took the challenge. I went in there, I think I was around 16 or 15. For some reason, I'm not sure if it was my testosterone levels kicking in, or trying to act all tough, but I told myself I wasn't going to turn towards the window as always. Instead, I was going to stand by the window, facing the room. Sure enough, the classic feeling came along. The same feeling, fear, and that noise as well. I started sweating right away. I felt like the air in the room was getting thick and was crushing me. When I thought I wasn't going to be able to breathe, I saw this dark, tall shadow standing over the animal. Just a big black shadow. As soon as that happened, fuck that, I started screaming, but nobody would come in. I was frozen in my spot, and I couldn't move. It's kind of blurry after that. I remember my cousins coming in and sort of surrounding me and pushing me out. I remember sitting with them at the bottom of the stairs, sobbing, but I didn't know how I got there. I remember feeling the need to just leave, and I did. Well, not like run away or anything, but more like I just needed to step out of the house for a moment. So my cousins and I all went to the backyard, and for the rest of the day, I refused to go back inside the house. And for many years after, I didn't go back in there again till I was 18, and my grandmother decided to sell the house and move to a smaller one. The whole family came to help her pack and move. She asked me and my cousins to help her pack up the spare room, the one with the black door. I'm not sure why I was fine with it. Maybe I just wanted to see if I had just imagined everything. But she said to wait and to not go up there yet. She told us to keep packing up the rest of the house. A few hours passed, and a car pulled up and 4 men got out. 4 traditional native men. I say this because of what they were wearing. She went in and opened the door before they could knock. They quickly greeted my grandmother, and they disappeared throughout the kitchen. I thought it was a little strange, but I figured they were friends of my grandparents that I hadn't met, and that they were also going to help pack. I was busy helping pack up downstairs when an hour or so later, I saw the men leaving out the front door. They were carrying a big wooden crate that they loaded into their car. My grandma looked out the window for a while after they left, and then told me and my cousins that it was time to pack up the room with the black door. We went inside, and I couldn't believe the difference. I'm not sure if it's because of how much time had passed, but it felt so much better than before. There was still this creepy feeling, but there was no heavy air, no buzzing, no fear. Then I realized the taxidermy animal was gone. I asked my grandmother about it, and she said, "What animal?" I asked if those men took it, and she said, "What man?" And she also wouldn't look me in the eyes as she was answering. I tried again, and I asked, "What happened to the animal, and where did it come from anyways?" She then said, "Everything belonged to your grandfather, and we don't talk about it." She said it in a firm way that really meant that she wasn't going to talk about it, and I could tell she was getting upset, so I just dropped it. So I guess the question that I said that I had from the beginning, what do you all think this was, or what exactly happened? I have now moved on. I am married. I'm in another season of my life, but I do still wonder what exactly this thing was. My grandmother also passed away some time later, so I wasn't able to ask her again, but I also doubt she was going to tell me. Of the countless hours I spent in the woods, it's the one time, the only few seconds that I can't explain. I distance hike whenever I can. Sometimes this means getting up early or staying out late to get as many miles in as possible. Sometimes walking in the pitch dark with a low light headlamp is pretty scary. I grew up in the woods of this area. I slept under the stars more nights than I can count. I have trekked thousands of miles of trail, riverbank, lakeshore, ridge, bogs, and creeks. I have hunted the game. I'm saying this because it's important you understand that I heard, seen, and even smelled about all this region has to offer, in the way of wilderness that is. But the most scariest experience, though, happened at around 4:30 in the morning. It was late spring, so the first morning light wouldn't be visible in the treetops for another 30 to 45 minutes. Another hour past that until sunrise. I was on mile 5. I'm in a low bottom that's wedged between 2 steep ridges, muddy and completely hemmed in by thick underbrush, young maple, and some old oak growth. I'm focused on the small light from my headlamp. just one step after the other, zoned out. Then, a loud crack, and I froze solid. This is the part that I have trouble describing. 4:30 in the springtime means I'm the only one making noise. No birds chirping, nothing, just dead quietness. Mid-step I froze. When fight or flight kicks in, you have these instincts kick in. The one that instantly flashed into my mind as I stood there balancing myself into silence was, if I hear that again, I'm turning around and I'm gonna go back the way that I came. Why? Because that sound was not a branch breaking. It wasn't deadfall. It wasn't a widowmaker. I was damn sure I had just heard something intentional. Hearing it twice, well, that means to get out of here. To describe it as best as I can, it sounded like a decent-sized wooden stick being whacked against a small tree. More a fungal bat-sized stick than a baseball bat. Its distinction in my head being that the sound was a crack and not a thud or a thump. And I have described it in the past as explosive because it was so sudden and so fucking loud. I had the sense that it was about 50 yards directly in front of me, and it was loud and clear. Now as I stood there, completely scared, I realized the soon-to-be worst part of my situation. I knew where the sound had came from, and I knew where the trail went. In about 30 yards, I was gonna have to come to a 180-degree turn and start up the ridge going away from the creek. This means that as soon as I got the courage to move towards the noise, I was gonna have to turn my back to it and get up the ridge. This made me very nervous. My head was somewhere between meth fiend murder and Bigfoot. Minutes passed. I just breathed my foggy breath into my glasses and listened. Nothing. Dead quiet. I got about 20 to 30 minutes until first light. I crank up the headlamp and I start to slowly creep up to the 180 turn. By the way, when you wear a headlamp in the woods at night, every tree branch in front of you is casting a big black moving shadow on the trail, so this definitely didn't help. I get to the turn and I quickly make the bend. I'm moving pretty fast at this point, trying to be quiet so I can listen while going up the trail. And then it hit me. I smelled it. A stench hits me that I can't describe. I just imagine wet, rotten death. I actually work scenes where humans have expired in my past life as a firefighter. However, this was like days old, and it just smelled strange. I kept walking fast. By the time that I made the top of that ridge, I was huffing, and the first light was showing. But I didn't stop moving until full light was out, and the birds were chirping again. I heard just about everything in the woods. I smelled it all, but I'm telling you, I'm not sure what the hell that was. If you're indigenous, or even if you aren't, what's your view on Ouija boards? I'm asking because my mom said there's a reason why the elders are the only qualified people to do ceremonies, and even sometimes down to the smudging as well. She told me it's because these ceremonies, well, maybe I shouldn't tell you, but basically she said to never use something that you weren't taught to use, especially when it comes to calling on spirits and mingling with that side of things. I figure I'll give you a background on this before I tell you my personal experience with these things. I do want to warn you, you should most likely smudge after reading this. I know everyone has their own opinion on this, and I get it. This isn't a hill that I'm willing to die on, simply because it comes from Western spiritualism. We natives have our own ways of communicating with spirits, like ceremonies, and dreams, and even prayers. This is after we have been taught and guided on how to do this. But of course there's people in the media who have always portrayed this as fun games to joke with and play with. So I was talking with a buddy of mine last week, and he told me something that made me remember what I went through. He told me that he had played with a Ouija board a few months ago, and he said nothing happened. But he said after a few weeks some weird things started happening. He didn't explain what, but he said those boards are dangerous. It can lie to you. and tell you what you want to hear. He said they pretend to be who they are not. He then told me that he didn't want to talk about it. As a matter of fact, he wouldn't even say their name. I get it. I mean, he is the one who told me about it. Other friends have told me in the past that these are nothing but gateways, that they are portals and used by spirits. So all of this made me remember when I was younger, and I was living with my parents at that time. My mom was very traditional, but my dad wasn't. So anyways, I have this friend of mine who can see things. At least that's what he claimed. I think we were both around 15 at this time. So one day he calls me and tells me if we want to play the Ouija board in my house. Me being a skeptic, I said alright. So we got the crew together. It was 3 of us who grew up together out here on the res. When he arrived, me and my friend were laughing at him. It wasn't a real one. It was a homemade board, and I didn't believe it was gonna work. He sat at my table and we sat down and started playing. At first when it started to move, I thought it was just him. And to be honest, I think it was him. I don't think there was anything real going on. Our other friend said he didn't want to play no more, and he said he was busy so he had to leave anyway. So we said goodbye, and then we just started playing video games. Towards the afternoon, my friend who had brought the Ouija board ended up going back home. Mind you, everybody stayed a few minutes down the road. At first I was trying not to think about it, but I kept having this feeling that I wasn't alone. But my house is kind of freaky anyway, so I just shrugged it off as a coincidence. I do love all scary things, but I do know the boundary line between what to mess with and how far one can go. At least that's what I thought. So I was reading scary stories online. It was sorta late, and my parents were not home yet, so I was laying in bed reading and watching videos on my phone. I was also texting my buddies on the group chat, and my friend who had left that house earlier, he shared the link to a video. The video was about how these demons had followed this woman after she had played with one of the Ouija boards. I should say that I've seen a lot of scary movies, and I have also read a lot of scary stories, so I can actually handle this, at least I thought. So I'm in my room by myself, no one else is home. Not to mention the lights are off because my dad would always complain about the bill getting too high. But anyways, my buddy, the one who had brought the fake board, said if we could hop on a phone call because he wanted to tell us something. My friend said he couldn't as he was about to shower, and so I ended up calling him. And I was listening to him tell me about that video link that he had sent. I swear, as he was talking to me, I could hear him, but I could also hear other voices in different tones. I thought it was the TV in the background, so I asked what he was watching, and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I hear those voices in the background," and he was just like, "I don't hear anything." Now at this point I was definitely creeped out, so I told him I had to go, and he said alright that he was gonna message us. As I was about to hang up, my friend said, "Wait." I figured he wanted to tell me something else, so I waited. What he said next was something that I will never forget. He was like, "I know you're there alone, but I'm there with you now." I was already creeped out, but I was definitely now scared. Thought it was him playing a prank on me, except it didn't sound like him. So I just sent a message saying, "What the fuck, dude?" But there was no response. I locked myself in the bedroom at this point, and I started praying. I was scared. When my parents came home, I explained to them everything. My mom was mad, and she asked why I would even bring a Ouija board into the house. She ended up chewing me out. But something that I want to point out is that she told me that she personally doesn't think that these boards themselves have some sort of power to contact. She said it's the intention behind it. She said the energy you give it, you can also just give it to anything else. For example, you quote unquote play with the spirits. You can do that anytime if that's your intention. You don't need a physical Ouija board itself, but with the ones they sell, the main purpose behind them is for evil, even if it's a fake one. You can set bad spirits free. You can even undo certain things that our elders or even ancestors have already dealt with before. And after this happened, is when my journey into digging into my own roots and traditions started. Now, I don't play with any of this, and I respect everything much more. Back then, I didn't fully understand what I was doing. I thought it was just about being curious. But what I learned is that there's a reason our people have these rules. There's a reason we have elders, a reason things are taught. Ever since then, I've been more careful. I smudge when something feels off. I also pray. And yes, my mom also ended up getting some guy to come cleanse the house, and all of us as well. My friend who missed out on the action when he went to go shower, he said nothing happened to him. But I still told him that he should tell his parents, because sometimes it takes months, even years, for something to happen. And my other buddy who was messing with these things, I'm not even sure what happened to him. I do wonder sometimes because they ended up moving, and I didn't hear from him again. This happened during the summer of 2013. I decided it was time to go out and kill some coyotes for their fur. I grabbed my basic AR-15. I like the way that AK slings attach, so I rigged up my own ratchet sling point on the barrel, slung it over my right side, wrapped it around my neck, messenger style, and I rode my ATV up to this old cabin on the mountain. Once I got there, I took the key out of the ATV and started looking around the area. I had been tossing squirrel and rabbit guts out into the woods for the past few days as bait. When I checked, all the guts were gone, so I knew something had been by. The whole time I was out there, I couldn't shake this weird feeling. You know that feeling when something's just off? Maybe. There's this guy who lives on the mountain, just down the road from the cabin. As I'm thinking about all this, I noticed that he's not there. His car's not there. Right around then, I start thinking that I hear footsteps in the woods. Not mine, but something else shuffling through the grass, just for a split second after each of my own steps. That's when I spot something weird in the distance. It looks like a stick figure almost, skinny, all crooked. It was standing downhill from me a bit, so it was hard to make out. I waved my hand, and as soon as I did that, immediately it darted behind a tree. That's when I thought, oh God, noping the fuck out of here and going back to the cabin. And that's exactly what I did. I sat around for a bit, had a couple of drinks, not enough to get drunk, just enough to take the edge off. I was trying to shake off that creepy feeling from earlier. A few hours go by, it's getting dark, and then I start hearing coyotes yelping off in the distance. At this point I had completely forgotten about the weird thing from earlier. I locked in, waiting on the coyotes. I was outside on the porch with all the lights off, sitting as still as I could, just listening. The yelping started to fade out. Then, out of nowhere, I hear a low voice. It says, "Help me." I looked over towards my neighbor's house and saw that the lights were off. I didn't even notice that he had left. Then I hear it again. "Help me." My first thought was maybe the neighbor had gone into the woods, fallen, broke his leg or something, and with all the bait that I had been tossing out, maybe the coyotes were gonna come in and he was gonna be in trouble. The anxiety hit me fast. I figured I had to go check. I started walking towards the woods and could tell the voice was coming from the ATV trail. So I hopped back onto my ATV, grabbed my AR, and went down the trail. I'm rolling through the dark, and I come up on this U-shaped dip in the path. I didn't hit the brakes. I just coasted through it, and right as I'm in the dip, I hear that voice again, but this time it screams, "Help me." I freaked out. I tried to turn the ATV too fast, and I ended up flipping it. I blacked out for a second. When I came to, I was under the damn thing. It was heavy as hell. I stayed still. I let my eyes adjust to the dark. I started feeling around. My left leg was stuck, and no matter how hard I pushed, I couldn't get it off. It felt like the thing had gained 100 pounds in those few minutes. The sling around my neck told me that I still had my rifle. I pulled it close and realized my arm was bleeding pretty bad. I checked over the gun best I could. Handguard was all jacked up. The stock was cracked, but it still looked like it would fire. At that point I just thought, well, alright, 30 rounds. That should be enough to keep me alive until morning, or until someone finds me. I was dead silent, listening to the forest, but then I heard something shuffling again. Then silence. Total silence. Not even the wind this time. I have never felt fear like I did right then. Every inch of me was screaming. The sound came again. Saw footsteps in the grass. Then I heard the voice again. Help me. And again. Help me. I didn't know if I should respond or just stay quiet. The shuffling kept getting closer. Then something leaned over the ATV, just like someone checking on you if you fell down at a bar. Casual, human-like, but this thing was huge, like 9 fucking feet tall. I was frozen, barely moving, just twitching my fingers and reaching for my gun. I raised it to my shoulder and aimed it towards this thing, whatever it was, without even really looking at it. I didn't want to look, but then the voice came again. Help me, help me. I could feel it getting closer, still looking away, and then something grabbed my face. This was it. I thought I was done. My brain just shut down. I tried to find my trigger finger, but it felt like my body wouldn't move, almost like I was paralyzed. Then it turned my head towards it. I'm face to face with this nightmare, staring into its eyes. It looked like if Gollum from Lord of the Rings had been on meth for 5 years and cut up his face with a knife. Sunken cheeks, deep, lifeless eyes, and its breath. I have never smelled anything that bad in my whole life. That's when I felt the flash of my rifle bump into it, and that's when everything clicked back into place. I remember I was armed. My brain finally booted up again. I screamed, and it screamed back, loud, like something being tortured. I pulled the trigger, not even aiming at this point, just yanking it again and again. The gun starts going off. My ears are ringing like hell. This thing then grabs me by my hair and starts slamming my head into the dirt, over and over. I'm still shooting, or trying to, but then it rips the gun out of my hands, and it starts beating me with the broken stock of it, just hammering away at me. Then, all of a sudden, lights start flickering through the trees. I was barely conscious, about to black out, when I heard something louder than even its screaming. I swear to God, this thing dropped my gun, and it started screaming and ran off into the woods. My gun hit the dirt maybe 10 feet away from me. The light was still coming towards me, and at that point, I'm not sure if I was being saved, or if I was dying. Then I heard someone shout, "Hold on," and they said my name. Someone tugged on my arm. I turned my head and saw it was the guy who lived down the road. He was holding a massive revolver. I think it was like a Magnum 500. It almost looked like a movie prop. Then I saw him fire again. Whatever that thing was. It dropped, and it started twitching on the ground. I ended up blacking out. I woke up in the hospital with a ton of stitches in my head, and all over my body as well. When I finally got out, I asked my neighbor what he saw that night. He just shrugged and said, "It was just a bear. Don't worry about it. We get them around here all the time." I looked at him like he was crazy. I'm not convinced I got beat half to death with my own rifle by a fucking bear. I moved down to the lower eastern part of Idaho with my wife and my 1-year-old daughter. They are part of the Shoshone-Bannock tribe in Fort Hall, Idaho. So our home is kind of like in the middle of nowhere. Nothing but land and hills surrounding us. We have a few neighbors around, but that's about it. We live right in front of a small butte, small enough to walk up in about 20 minutes. Mind you, I have never lived on the rest. You know, I'm a city native here. But when I first moved in, I never even thought about skinwalkers or deer women. Nothing like that. I never experienced anything like that in my life. So when my wife would tell me about stories about things that she's seen or heard, I would never believe her. I never believed in any of that until this one night that changed everything. It was in the middle of winter. Me and my wife got into a heated argument, and I can say that we chose peace, but I still went for a walk, even though she told me not to be out at night. I wanted to piss her off by doing it anyways, so I walked by myself to the butte. It was about 7:30 p.m. The sky was dark, and it was also cold, so there was nothing but me and my thoughts. As I was walking up the hill, I kept feeling like someone was watching me. I had an eerie feeling the whole time that I'm walking, and then I come up to a few big boulders. As I'm ready to turn back and go home, that's when I started to hear voices. Voices that mimic my wife and baby. That's when I hear the voice of my wife, screaming, "Help us, help our baby. Our baby is choking. She can't breathe. Babe, help." And I also hear what sounds like a baby choking. I turned around where the voice was coming from. I pointed my flashlight, and there it was. Right in front of me, I saw them. Two of them. Tall, pale white figures. The faces, they were ugly. No mouth. Big dark hole as eyes. No nose, just nostrils. I see them as they keep trying to draw me using the voice of my wife. I'm almost convinced that my wife was near, but my instincts kicked in, and I took off running home so fast. I didn't stop because I felt like they were following me, but I was still in fear of looking back. So when I finally got home, I went inside, locked the door, and went to my room. They were there. My wife was singing to our daughter while she was putting her in her cradle board. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a bad dream. I told her what happened, and my wife immediately got to smudging me, and she also made me throw my clothes out. It felt like a nightmare. After that, I started to hear what sounded like owls outside our house every night. I would also hear some sounds on my roof like moving. I could also hear thuds outside my house. I prayed, I smudged, until it finally went away. But after that night, I never went outside after the sun went down again. I learned my lesson. So when they tell you not to go outside, you should listen. This story is about my experience on the res, and this happened while traveling. It's about the floating trench coat man. That's what we call him in my tribe. Have you heard about him? It happened after we went to go see an indigenous doctor down in Montana. My family is very rooted in our traditions and teachings. We believe in medicine, in dreams, in signs, in the spirits. We were all taught to listen to our elders, especially when they speak. This all came down from my grandparents. Whenever they spoke, you listened. So on this night, we were driving back home to British Columbia. It was about 1 a.m, and we had already crossed back into Canada. It was me, my mom, my cousin, my uncle, and my grandma. We were all packed in the car. We were talking, telling stories, singing songs, and just talking about what the doctor had said. My grandma was asleep in the front passenger seat. She was all bundled up. I say she was asleep because she hadn't said anything for like the last hour. Then, out of nowhere, she sits up, almost like something had woken her, and she just says, "Don't pick up that guy in the trench coat walking." And then she just sits back down. We all looked around like, what guy? There was no one else on the road. Not a single car. Nobody. It was just us. I remember sort of laughing, almost joking. I was like, "Alright, Grandma, you're dreaming again." But when I looked around, nobody else was smirking or laughing. Nobody. Everybody was just quiet. I guess they were taking it seriously. So I just stayed quiet about it. Didn't make another joke or anything. I actually felt a little weird after that. Anyways, about 15 minutes later, There was a man walking with his back to us in a black trench coat. We were the only people on the highway at this time, and my mom and I were like, "Hey, it's that guy." And then I made a joke about it again. I remember leaning over to the window to get a closer look, and that's when my grandma suddenly said, "Don't look at him." I guess she was awake. And I shit you not, it was too late. When I looked at his feet, he was floating, or something. I remember feeling a little shaky, and then felt like I was gonna puke. My grandma told us to look away, and to not talk about him, and to pray. I remember nobody else said anything. My grandma just kept telling us to pray. All I know is that my mom and I were the only ones to see him straight on. My cousin and uncle didn't see him, only through their side view. The rest of the drive was just quiet, pretty awkward. Nobody said anything else for like the next 30 minutes or so. And after we finally got home, nobody said anything else. Me and my family never brought this up again, but I heard one of your stories and wanted to share my personal experience with him. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure if I should even be talking about this. Nothing happened, nor did I see him again, but I heard it just happened so random. Maybe I should reach out to my grandma, or even to my own mom. Maybe they will tell me something now that time has passed. Has anybody experienced anything like this on the road? Let me know what you all think I should do. Thanks. Have you ever heard a woman crying in the middle of the night, far away, like distant? Some people say it's an owl, a deer, a spirit, maybe a skinwalker, maybe. I know every tribe has its own teaching about animals, especially when it comes to deer, owls, coyotes, or even certain birds, dogs. Apparently they carry messages and warnings, sometimes even testing people. If you shoot them and they don't die, or if they act strange, it's a sign that you encounter something else. What about your family or your tribe? What were you told not to mess with? I grew up in South Dakota, along the Grand River. My mom always told the stories we all hear growing up on the res, but I think something that a lot of people don't seem to know about are the black-tailed deer. One of the things she told us is that we could go hunting, but never to kill a black-tailed deer. She told us a story about some hunters who saw a huge black-tailed deer and shot it. When they went to go skin it, it had turned into a man when it died. My personal encounter was a few years back. I was working with my dad and we went to go check on some cows. We drove along the riverbed and off towards a ravine. There was a clearing at the bottom of the ravine where the grass was about ankle deep, and it was surrounded by trees. It was towards sunset and it was very beautiful. There in the clearing was a very large buck. He didn't get startled by our presence, and it was eating the grass. He looked up at us, and it just kept eating. My dad was always ready to bring some meat home, so he reached down and got his rifle out. He loaded the rifle and drove us a little closer to the deer. The deer again looked at us, but it still wasn't alarmed. My dad stopped the truck and opened his door. He got out and aimed at the buck. We were so close that we could hear him chewing the grass. My dad was a deadly shot, and he took aim and shot the deer. We heard the snap as the bullet struck the deer. The deer looked up at us and just moved his tail a bit, and he kept eating. My dad then walked around to the front of the truck, aimed again, and shot. We heard the bullet pop when it hit the buck, but again, he just shook his tail and continued eating. My dad said, "What the hell? I know I hit him." At this point, almost like it heard my dad say something, the deer looked at us, and it turned to walk away. When it did, my dad's whole demeanor just changed. He said, "Get inside and let's go." So I did. As we were driving away, he said not to worry, that the deer is not gonna die. I asked why does he say this, and he said that it was a black-tailed deer, but he didn't know it was. That is, until it turned to walk away. There were a few other instances that my mom told us about them deer. I can't remember much of how the stories go, but the one that always freaks me out is when she was younger, staying at her uncle's house with her cousins. She said her uncle went out hunting and brought a few of them back. He must have not known about the black-tailed ones, because apparently he strung them up in his backyard and left them hanging overnight. Now my mom said that the land that her uncle had was pretty big, and it was surrounded by trees and forest. That night, my mom said that her and her cousins were all trying to go to sleep. Now remember, the whole family was over. Everyone had their own room except for all the younger ones. She said at some point throughout the night, they all woke up to the sound of a woman crying far away. The crying was getting louder, so they all went to look out the window in the room. It was coming from behind the property. When they looked around, there was a figure standing in the distance, far out in the tree line. A black silhouette. It just kept moving. She said it was weird because no dogs were barking. My mom and the rest of the teenagers just stood there watching her. It was kind of creepy the way she described it. This figure, lady, whatever it was, she said you couldn't see her feet. It was like she was just floating. As they were looking, their bedroom door suddenly slammed open so loud that they all screamed. It was her uncle and aunt. They rushed in and told everyone to get away from the window, close the curtains, and go to sleep. My mom said that she also noticed some kind of fine powder that her uncle sprinkled along the base of the window, and they didn't explain anything. They did listen, but my mom said that they all had trouble sleeping. She said everyone stayed up because they kept hearing knocking on the door and tapping on the windows, like fingernails. The next morning, everything changed. Nobody said anything about last night. She said the energy in the house was just off. Her uncle and aunt seemed tired, and everyone avoided the windows as well. After breakfast, everyone's parents showed up. Apparently, uncle and auntie had called all the parents to come pick everyone up, even though they always spent more than just a few days there. After my mom and the rest of the family left, she said her uncle started acting strange. According to what her mom eventually told her, uncle wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk much, and that night, he kept hearing a woman whispering outside his window. My mom said that he even covered the windows with blankets and moved his bed to the living room, just so that he didn't have to see outside. My mom said that the next day he went to a local medicine man. He brought tobacco, but the medicine man didn't even let him inside. He stood in the doorway and told him, "You knew better, and now your whole family has seen her. That wasn't just a deer. You disrespected something you knew about." The medicine man didn't even take the offering, the tobacco. He just said, "It's not me you should be making an offering to. You were lucky this time. Burn the meat, bury the hides past the tree line, and pray to Creator that He helps you." Later that night, her uncle burned the meat. He buried the hides past the tree line, and he never saw her again. And even after that, he never went hunting deer again. I never believed in the afterlife, paranormal, or any kind of religion. However, I was always open-minded. If someone were to tell me about an experience, I would listen and respect your view. But I'm one of those people who's got to see it to believe it. But what I'm going to tell you is the very reason for my sudden shift and transition, turning me into a believer. I live in Florida, and I was 17 at this time. This was during the cold month of July. Florida in July meant that it would be raining for the next few months. My friends and I would hang out outside, being adventurous and getting into trouble. I pride myself with the belief that I'm a good guy. I received good grades and behave myself for the most part. But my friend Dylan, he isn't the best influence on me, and we're always together. Like, always. I guess this might give you a better picture of what type of person Dylan was. Well, his parents kicked him out, and he was living with us for a while. I didn't mind it. He was one of my best friends. If it wasn't for him, I would be the same shy kid who kept to himself and never left the house. My parents, however, they didn't see him in the same light, but they didn't have the heart to see him roaming the streets by himself. It was kind of complicated. My parents were good people, and they also knew him since he was little, so they had a soft spot for him. Plus, I think as you grow and mature, you see things differently, and you try your best to help others around you. So my parents were gone, and it was me, Dylan, and Dylan's friend, Cameron. We were all sitting inside, watching a scary ghost hunting show. I didn't know Cameron that well, but he seemed like a pretty good guy. Dylan is the one who would invite him, since, he lived with me. Cameron got up to use the bathroom, and that's when Dylan told me about this incredible idea that he had. He said that Cameron scares easy. After all, he's one of those people who jump at any noise and would get startled by you coming up behind him, saying hi or anything. Except, it wasn't so incredible. I thought it was about like scaring him when he comes back from the bathroom or something. But this dude had one of the craziest ideas. He said that he knew of this place that's supposedly abandoned and creepy as hell. He claimed that he checked it out before with some of his friends, and that it's safe. He said that we should all go there and give Cameron a good scare. I told him it was raining outside, but he's very convincing. Or maybe I was just peer pressure, but he said that I couldn't be scared of a little bit of rain. And well, basically, when Cameron came out the bathroom, Dylan told him all about it, except he didn't mention that it was creepy and abandoned, and instead he just said, it's a cool hangout spot where we can do anything we want, including smoke some pot. Cameron basically said, sounds good to me. I had a moment to myself where I was like, fuck, if only he would have said no. We could have still been in the comfort of my home. It was getting a bit dark. Walking through the sidewalk, having huge pools of water splashed at us from one side of the road as cars passed by. At this point I was a bit irritated. I was completely soaked and I felt like I was carrying 20 extra pounds of weight. I'm a pretty small guy, and I really didn't work out. I remember asking Dylan if we were almost there. He then said, yeah, we're actually here. And he just runs across the street like a maniac. And he stops at this horrendous looking tree line, gated off by some fencing. Over here. Me and Cameron looked at each other and gave one another the same look. We waited for any cars that were going by. Then we crossed. The first thing I noticed was the huge sign smack dab on the center of the gate that said, no trespassing. I looked around some more at my surroundings. The trees had me feeling queasy. It looked like something straight out of a horror film. At this point it was raining, and I couldn't see very far. It gave the illusion that there was an infinite amount of trees blending in. I then told Dylan, please don't tell me we gotta go in there. He never said anything about the woods. Dylan then responded, it'll be fun. Nobody will see us. And this way we won't leave your parents' home smelling like weed. We had to climb over the fence to get inside. I know we shouldn't have gone in there. All of this to smoke some weed, huh? Was it worth it? I guess you'll see after I tell you what happens. As we walked, Dylan said that the place was just down this awful looking stretch. The entire walk through the trail was so scary because by now, it was dark. Not like completely dark, but the trees made it seem like it was midnight, even though I think it was around like 9 p.m. As we walked, I kept hearing some weird ass noises. The whole time getting here was just the sound of the rain, the wind, the cars, and water. But these other noises out here, it reminded me a lot of that movie Predator, where the crew is walking through the woods and they keep hearing noises. Dylan was the one leading. I followed behind him and Cameron was behind me. We had to walk this way because the trail was extremely narrow now, and just when you think it couldn't get worse. But it did. The trail was dirt, but now it was mud. My shoes started sinking into the soil, and I had to fight every step of the way to dig them out. Also, one of the weird noises that had me anxious was coming from behind Cameron. I looked back a few times every time that I heard it, and I would ask Cameron if he was alright. I know at this point I was freaked out, so I can only imagine how he felt. Cameron looked like the sound didn't bother him. Or maybe Dylan never told me that Cameron was half deaf, because it was so loud. It sounded almost like we had another person walking behind us. I swear it sounded like either Cameron had 4 feet or someone else was behind him. But like I said, every time that I asked him if he was alright, he acted like nothing. I think he was just trying to seem brave. The other noises I was hearing came from the sides of the woods. It was like whistling, but maybe it was the wind. I gained some comfort when I looked ahead and saw the tree line. We all picked up the pace and made our way towards it. The bunkhouse was actually a lot bigger than it appeared from a distance. It was super old and grainy. There was one of those huge dumpster bins resting against the front left side on the outside wall. I'm not sure what was inside of it, but it did smell really bad. I took a guess that maybe someone was sleeping here during the nights. Some of the wooden beams that were supposed to be holding the property up were hanging. It looked like a suicide mission. The inside of the bunkhouse was pitch black, but I could see on the doorframes that a mossy plantation was taking over the building. At this time the rain had died down, and I was able to look up at the building more without being struck by rain in the face. Some points in the roof had been chipped away, creating some small holes for the rain to sink into the wood panels. I started to get this fear of this building coming down on us, but if you saw the state of it, you would understand. Cameron, finally with the words of wisdom, he said, "I'm not going in there. It looks like a damn witch house." But Dylan just told him that he's been here before. I know how it looks, but I've been here before a few times. It's just abandoned. You think other people would actually walk in the rain to get here? They don't even know about it. It's just go inside and get out of the rain and smoke. Cameron went back and forth with Dylan, but like me, Cameron finally gave in. And surprisingly, it was the first one to enter. And then it was Dylan. Then I went in. It was massive inside, and dark. There was just enough light coming in from the ceiling to see what was going on. It wasn't your typical bunkhouse. Normally inside of one, there's beds along both sides of the walls. But this place seemed to have a few rooms, like a mini hotel. Dylan then took us to the furthest room. Well, the hall was super narrow. Only one person fit through it. As Dylan went inside, me and Cameron just waited in the, in the lobby. We then heard Dylan, "Alright, come through." As I started walking, I heard the sound of footsteps coming up from behind us. It sounded like someone was coming down the way we came in. Keep in mind, it's pretty dark now, and the only light is from the moon itself. So when we heard the footsteps and turned around, Cameron screamed and started pushing me, telling me to hurry the fuck up and get into the room. I was scared too, but I felt like Dylan was maybe messing with us. Maybe he was trying to scare Cameron. Maybe he went around somehow. But when we got into the room, Dylan was there, looking surprised, saying what the heck was going on. When Cameron made it, he was looking scared, and he said, "I want to go back. This place is some freaky shit." Dylan apparently found it amusing. He started laughing while trying to flick the light switch on the room. "Sometimes some animals come in here," he said. Cameron then said that was no fucking animal. I told Dylan that I also heard it. It sounded like someone else was behind us, but he just stood there ignoring us, flicking it on and off. His stupid grin went away when he said, "This light was working when I came here last time. I can't see shit." He started reaching into his pocket. The room that we were in was very dark, and it only had one bed and a window. At this point, I'm starting to question myself, how I agreed to come out here. That's when I finally built the courage, whatever you want to call it, and told Dylan, "I don't want to be here," and Cameron sure as hell doesn't either. "Why don't we just..." I heard a loud bang coming from the lobby, down the hall that we had just came down from. Cameron was jittering in place at this point. He was like, "Oh my god." Even Dylan showed some fear by saying, "Dude, what the fuck was that?" As for myself, I thought it was one of the wooden beams giving way. Dylan's hand came out from his pocket, gripping one of those small flashlights. It was really dark, but my eyes adjusted a bit. Dylan shined the flashlight into the main lobby, lighting up the hall that we had just came through. When he did, all of us, including Cameron, we all saw a black figure move across the lobby, from left to right. "Turn the fucking light off," Cameron said. We all backed up towards the window. Dylan placed his hand over the light. The room was dark again. This time my eyes were a little blurry from the quick flash. They had to refocus. I couldn't see anything at this point. "What the fuck was that?" Dylan said. "Maybe it was some hobo or some homeless guy." Cameron was stuttering at this point, and jittering, shaking, all of the above. He said that was no person. "Did you see the shape?" I guess we all saw something different, but we knew it was some sort of shadow or something. Dylan then said, "Let's get out of here." And he looked towards the screen window of the room. "Let's go through here." Maybe it was the adrenaline or something turned on inside Cameron, but he ripped open the screen window and he said, "Let's go." When he did, that's when we heard it. The light switch. It was flicking on and off. The one inside the room that we were in. Cameron and Dylan were standing right beside me. I freaked out at this point. White noise started to fill my ears, along with the flickering sound of the light switch. It was increasing in speed. Cameron started saying, "Let's go." I'm not sure why. I know why he did it. Dylan removed his hand from the flashlight and shined it at where the light switch was at. When the light hit the wall of the light switch, we could see that no one was standing there. But the light switch was still flickering. At this point, Cameron is already outside, as he had gone through the window, because I know Dylan was now climbing through the window as well. He just kept saying, "Run, run." I felt like I was being held in place. It was a weird feeling. The flickering of the light switch stopped. I thought my heart did too, because that's when I heard a set of footsteps walking towards me. That's when I turned around and started to climb out the window. The top half of my body was hanging out the window, and everything below my waist was still hanging inside the room. I could see Dylan and Cameron miles ahead. These fuckers had left me. Maybe they thought I was behind them, but they didn't even look back. A chill went up my spine at the thought of this person, thing, whatever was here, grabbing a hold of me. Started kicking my legs, trying to wiggle myself over the window, and sure enough, that's when I felt a cold hand grab my ankle, and it stopped me from kicking. I pushed away with both of my legs, falling head first into the mud. I got up and ran like my life depended on it, and eventually I caught up to Dylan and Cameron a few minutes away, running through the trees. I wasn't even mad at them for leaving me. My hands were shaking all over as we made it back to my parents' home, but nobody believed us. The next day, Dylan was acting weird. He wouldn't joke about what happened. He wouldn't even talk about it. But what freaked me out more was Cameron. He stopped hanging out with us. He kind of distanced himself from us. I don't blame him. Dylan, eventually, as much grace and compassion my parents showed him, he started developing some pretty bad habits. And I think in about a week after this happened, he ended up moving back to his parents' home. I couldn't stop thinking about that place though, so I looked it up online. I tried to figure out what exactly it was. I pulled up some old maps, satellite images on Google. It took a while, but I did find something. It turns out that building, that bunkhouse, the one that Dylan thought was some chill abandoned hangout spot to smoke weed, apparently it used to be part of a state-run facility back in the 50s. Officially it was labeled as a temporary housing for migrant workers, but then I found a YouTube video of a guy who goes around exploring abandoned buildings. I don't know how true it was, but maybe they had better resources. As he was doing the vlog, he said it was actually a containment site for people, runaways, kids with behavior issues. He also said there were rumors about experiments, abuse, even a few disappearances. I remember somebody commenting on the video saying that the place was shut down after too many went missing and the building was just left to rot. But the scary part, I found another comment where somebody said that they went there one time. They described the layout, the lobby, the rooms, exactly how I saw it. And this person said that they saw shadows and also heard some noises, like some tapping. Maybe it was the same noise that we heard. I'm not sure. Like I said, I didn't believe in the paranormal, but I know what I saw. Even now, when I go to sleep, I imagine that light switch sound, flickering, turning on and off. I just hope that you don't hear it. Years ago, my dad used to work at a place in Tuba City, Arizona. It was called the Recovery Center, a place for counseling, getting over addiction and all that stuff. It was an old building, made of large brick rocks and the wooden floors creaked. It had a moldy smell to it. There were a few rooms throughout the building, which were offices, and it even had a basement, which was accessed from the outside through steps that led down there. This was back in the 80s. I guess in the 50s and 60s it used to be a hospital, and the basement was used as a morgue and a hospice area. So we used to stay the nights there on weekends as a family. We would watch movies and take showers there. We lived on the res at this time. There was no electricity and running water in the res that we stayed in. Well, at least back home. So when we spent the nights there, we took advantage. Can you blame us? Our dad was simply trying to help us get by. Now I want to tell you about a few creepy experiences that I had there. My dad would tell us that during the week when he would work, that him and his employees would hear strange noises, and sometimes even voices. He said that nobody liked going down to the basement, but they had to sometimes, because they used it as storage for files and archives, a bunch of furniture and some other things. Not to mention the lights were bad down there, string light bulbs hanging, and the actual floor down there was dirt. And whenever anyone went down there, everybody said they felt like somebody was watching them. My dad would say they would hear noises coming from below, and they would have to go look because sometimes the locals would break in and try to spend nights down there to stay warm. He said that one time during the day, mostly everyone left for lunch. Himself and some other guys stayed, and they were just sitting in the offices when they heard noises coming from the pool table that was down the hall in the rec room. They assumed that the others had came back, and they chose to start a game instead. They made their way down the hall to join the game, but when they got there, everything, including the pool balls, were all ragged, even though they said that they heard noises like people were playing. Some other time they heard a lady screaming from the basement. They went down there, and there was nothing. The next time it happened, they ended up calling the police, and were in one of the offices talking about what they had been hearing. And just then, everybody heard the lady scream, so they ran outside to get to the basement. With the two officers that showed up, they got the door open. The officers then took a look inside. Again, nothing. After a while, my dad said that they started raking the floor in the basement. They did it to see if anyone would walk around down there. So after they started raking the dirt, they started to notice what looked like something being dragged along the floor. The next day, they started to notice what looked like something being dragged along the floor. Now back to when I was there on the weekends. We would never go near the basement door while playing outside. As a matter of fact, when we started staying there at first, I used to like it. But after a few weekends of hearing things, noises, and the stories from my dad, and even others, I didn't want to be there no more. Now the creepiest thing, or the final straw, was my last weekend there. We would all sleep at the end of the building. It had a huge open room, and I would always sleep next to the wall underneath the window. My parents would sleep on the opposite side of where I slept at. There was a tiny hole, maybe the size of a quarter in the floor. If you looked down there, you could see into the basement. So we would all dare each other to look down there. A few times when we did that, the lights would be on down there, and even then we would still look. And I swear, I saw a black shadow or something moving down there. I know you must be thinking that wasn't scary, but it really was to me. After that, I just ended up staying back home instead, as we ended up getting electricity and running water after a while. It was such a scary place to me. So I was happy when we moved and my dad got transferred, which means that we were not going to be going back there again. I'm not sure if that building is still standing, but I'll tell you this though. People say that these places are haunted, but in my tribe they teach us to avoid these sort of places. Hospitals, abandoned buildings, old boarding schools, basically all these places where people died. Some people say that you shouldn't sleep where somebody passed away, that basically you'll be hearing voices, or you'll feel like there's somebody's eyes on you. Basically it's your spirit sensing something that you can't see, that feeling in your stomach. That's what that is. So there's things out here that are not meant to be disturbed, and maybe that's what happened down there in the basement. My mother was driving, and I was in the front seat passenger. My little brother, his friend, and my son, who was only a year old in his car seat, was in the back. All the boys were asleep. We were driving home from Tuba City, Arizona. My brother played in the All-Star B-Ball game that evening in Tuba. I was talking to my mom, keeping her company, and at the same time I was thinking in my head, when is this road gonna end? Because it seemed so long and a little curvy. As we talked, my mom came to a curve again. She slowed down because of the curve. And then, all of a sudden, a cow was right there coming onto the road. I'm not sure about now, but back then there was no fencing to keep animals off the highway. My mom then suddenly slammed on her brakes because the cow was right in front of us. As we stopped, the cow looked back at us like it was freaked out. Then it took off like it was limping, but in a strange way. The car lights were on high beam. My mom and I looked at each other like, what the hell was that? My mom took off and told me not to look out the window. Her knuckles were so white. I could tell she was afraid, because we still had ways to go to get to Many Farms Junction. To this day, I will never drive through there that late again. I really do think that was a skinwalker, but a cow. It looked weird. It looked like the skin was loose. My mom later on told me that she was scared. Her heart was beating so fast. She didn't want to make me more afraid, she said. From there, we still had a ways to go, but we made it. And we just didn't think or say much about what we saw till the next day. It's very creepy, going through that part of the rest that late. Anyways, even now remembering this, I'm getting shivers. I guess I ended up scaring myself by just remembering this. Did you know that you can pick up spirits on the road without even stopping? Out here on the res at night, it doesn't take much. You don't even have to stop. You don't even have to talk to anyone. And I'm not talking about hitchhikers or taking the wrong turn. The creepiest part of everything is that you won't even know it happened until you're home, until the dogs start acting weird, until the knocks come at night, or when you hear something whispering your name from a dark window. I know some of us are more sensitive to this kind of stuff. Curiosity sometimes feels harmless, but out here, curiosity is just another way of leaving the door cracked open for something to come in. So I'll go up to the rest for Easter to spend time with my family. It was me, my daughter and husband, and we decided to go to the casino. It was around 1 in the morning, and we got to 17 Mile and Yellow Calf Road. And when we turned, it sounded like our tailgate fell down on the truck. I told my husband to pull over, but my daughter said she heard something in the back, unless it was the music that was on. Now mind you, my daughter is not 8, 12, 15. No, she's actually 21. So I know she was being serious too and not one to joke with. My husband didn't feel right about this. So we drove a little bit more and I burned some sweetgrass and told him to pull over so that we could close the tailgate. We eventually pulled over and me and my husband got out to close the gate. But when we got in the back of the truck, the gate was closed. We looked at each other confused, and so we quickly got back inside of the truck, and we didn't even say anything to each other, nor to my daughter. We drove with the lights on. It's kind of funny looking back now, how fast we ran back inside the truck. But anyways, we get to the casino and lost our money as always, and we just went home. Now, once we were home, which was about 3 a.m., we all went to lay down. Then the dog started to cry, and it sounded like someone was whispering in the window. After a few minutes it got quiet, but then came the 3 knocks. I got chills, because I was wondering who would come around that late. So I just yelled at them to go away. The next night around the same time, the same thing happened again. The dog started crying, and the knocks and the whispers happened. Except this time something else happened. Something kept hitting the wall, and the dogs kept crying, even yelping till the sun came up. That's pretty much it, but that's the point that I'm trying to tell you. Since we've been back, some other crazy and weird things been happening. Like we hear people talking when only one of us is at home, and sometimes the doors just open and close. We also sometimes hear someone calling out to one of us when only one of us is at home. What do you all think? Maybe we picked up an extra passenger from the casino or something, unless it was from the road that we took when we heard our tailgate open. What do you all think? I want to tell you about an encounter I had with a skinwalker in Canyon de Chelly in Arizona. It happened back when I was younger, just out of high school. That summer, a bunch of us, some friends and a few family members, we had nothing to do. We were done playing sports, and unlike other summers when we were lifting weights, playing basketball, and also getting ready for football season, this time we just found ourselves bored. So we decided one night to go check out a place called Massacre Cave and Mummy Cave. You get there by driving from Chinle to Del Muerto, and before you hit the town of Saley, there's a turnoff that leads to a parking area. These caves are known for their Anasazi ruins, way older than the Navajo or the Hopi that were in the area. Now your history lesson to give you context. The stories go that if you go there at night, you can hear screams, babies crying, drums, gunshots, and even horses running, all from back then when the Navajo families were hiding during the long walk. Now this place is called Massacre Cave for a reason. Back in 1805, the army was going up against the natives, the children, the women, and the elders who had taken refuge in the canyon. They were hiding, and when they refused to surrender, the army would just kill the people. Now mind you, most of them were unarmed and also defenseless. If you don't believe me, Google it and you'll see. Anyways, one account goes that a woman, rather than letting the army take her and her child, instead of letting the soldiers kill her and her child, she jumped off the cliff with her baby in her arms. The families would hide here because there were a lot of places. They refused to be part of the long walk. They were going to have to round them up and have them walk for hundreds of miles. Those who refused were shot down, and many of them were killed right there. And this is why it's called the Massacre Cave. So that night, there were about 7 of us. We drove down in a friend's old van, and we were just hanging out near the overlook. After some time, one of the younger guys tossed a rock off the cliff. The drop was at least 200 or 300 feet, so you could hear it bounce and crash all the way to the canyon floor. A few seconds after the rock hit the bottom, that's when we heard something, a scream. And when I say scream, I actually mean a scream like a woman's shriek mixed with a cat's growl. It was loud, it was drawn out. We all froze, looking at each other like, what the hell was that? Some of us joked that it was most likely across the canyon, which was pretty far, and if something was there, it couldn't get to us, so we just kept hanging out. To be honest, I think some of us didn't want to look scary in front of everyone else. We all knew the stories. Skinwalkers, spirits, bad medicine. But you know how it is when you're young. You try to act tough, and deep down, some of us, including myself, were scared. Then, someone else threw another rock. And that's when I started to hear scratching as I was sitting in the overlook. Like fingernails scraping rock. Everyone else was talking among themselves. And that's when I yelled at everyone. Everyone shut up. There's something crawling up. They didn't believe me, including the guy who threw the rock. So he threw another. And whatever was climbing up, I could hear it going faster. That's when we heard the next scream, coming from just underneath us, like about 20 feet below. It was that same sound again, half woman, half animal, and that was enough for us. We all ran towards the van and sped off. We started laughing on the way back. After dropping off a few friends, they all lived in the same neighborhood. It was just me, my friend, and his little brother. We came to some intersection near the edge of the neighborhood. I remember this so much. There was only one dim street light, and there was no traffic. We slowed down to a stop, and that's when I noticed something on the road, maybe about 20 feet ahead of us, right underneath the street light. It looked like some sort of red or gold ball at first, or maybe some torn up kid's toy. We assumed somebody just threw it out, or maybe it was just rolling down. But then, as we sat there, this thing started to move. It rolled really slow towards the van. It continued rolling until it stopped right by my door. When it stopped, I opened it and looked down. It wasn't a ball. It was the head of a cat. Its eyes were missing, and the rest of its body was a few feet away, torn up, legs and arms shredded. We were shocked. My friend then yelled out, "Let's get the hell out of here." And we sped to his house, parked, went inside the house, and we just sat in the living room. But within 10 minutes, every dog in the neighborhood started barking. My friend happened to have 3 big dogs in the backyard, and they were also going crazy, running around like they were chasing something. We actually opened the back door to see what was going on, but we didn't see anything. But they were acting like there was another dog back there. Then, my friend's sister came into the living room. I'm not sure how, but she knew something was off. She ended up asking what we were doing, and then just straight up said, "Something ended up following you back." We tried to play dumb, but she said, "Don't play stupid with me." We admitted that we went to Massacre Cave, and she just completely chewed us out. She told us to burn cedar, and that something was definitely following us. A few minutes later, their dad came out, pissed off, asking what the noise was all about. The sister told him everything, told him that we went up to Massacre Cave, and something happened to follow us back. Of course, he got mad too. He told the little brother to go out and calm the dogs down. I'm not sure why, but at this point we were lucky it wasn't us. But he also refused to go outside, saying that he was scared. You can imagine the argument between their dad and him. A few minutes passed and the dogs settled down. Eventually the sister and their dad went back to their rooms, and we stayed in the living room. I can't remember, but I think we eventually fell asleep around 3 in the morning. I ended up staying the night there. The next day we talked to my friend's grandpa, who's a local medicine man. He told us straight up, both the Skinwalker and some Anasazi spirit ended up following us back. He said the scream we heard was the Skinwalker, and the whole cat thing was their doing. The dogs were barking because they sensed something was there. The grandpa did a ceremony for us afterwards, and he warned us to never go back there. I also remember a story from one of my classmates who lived near the canyon, and he said that he had seen Anasazi spirits running around. I never believed it until that night, and even today, people still say that they see things in that area. I guess we learned the hard way that those places aren't meant to be messed with. There's a reason why everybody on the res says to never go to those places at night. You never know what's out there, watching, listening, and waiting to come back. I got a creepy story to share. Makes me not even want to be around livestock out here on the res anymore. You always hear stuff about strange animals, some of them who talk, about owls, dogs, and go to walk on two legs and all sorts of stuff. But this was different. My uncle told me that he bought a beautiful white horse from some guy before I was born. This horse was a living statue, pure white with blue eyes, and everything was beautiful about it. He brought the horse home and turned him loose with the rest of his herd. After the first week of owning it, he noticed that the white horse would always stand away from the rest of the herd, and whenever it tried to walk up to them, they would all take off. My uncle, being a horseman since he was a kid, he assumed that the horse wasn't accepted into the herd just yet. A month had passed and the horse was still the outsider of the herd. One day, Uncle's neighbor from down the road stopped in to tell him that there was a group of coyotes taking down his calves. He warned that if they were eating them, they would most likely turn to the horse as well. That night, Uncle called over his friend and waited until dark for a stakeout. The night fell and the two headed to the fence line that separated the two properties. About a mile away from the fence, they parked up on a ridge where they could see everything. It was a full moon and they could see the whole land around them. The two were just talking quietly and waited, listening for the coyotes to start singing. A little after midnight, they started to hear a little bit of what sounded like thunder. They looked off to the side and saw the horses running, coming in fast. The horses ran down into the valley below the ridge. My uncle was watching and carefully just counted his horses, and he noticed that the white horse again, most likely bringing up the rear. The horses settled down in the valley, but you could tell that something was bothering them as they were pacing in a big circle. Then, from the dark tree line, the white horse came out. It started galloping, and halfway to the herd, it stood up and ran on two legs like a human, but just as fast as a horse. Uncle hit his lights, and the whole valley was lit up. In the brightness, the white horse was still running on two legs, and it sounded like it was laughing. The sudden lights caught the herd by surprise, and when the white horse reached the herd, it tried to jump on the nearest horse. The horse bucked and kicked and screamed, basically sending the white horse flying. The herd then bolted, taking off to the far side of the valley. Uncle and his friend just sat there frozen, staring. Down in the floodlights, the white horse slowly got to its feet. It wasn't limping. It just stood up like nothing happened, back on two legs. But this time, it was watching them, just staring. My uncle said that they quickly got in the truck, with their rifles with them, but nothing else happened. They went back and left the scene. They knew it was something with witchcraft going on, so they drove back to the house, just silent the whole ride. And the only thing they said was that they would take care of it in the daylight, in the morning basically. My uncle said that he didn't sleep that night. The next morning, just after the sun came up, Uncle and his friend, they went out together. They rode out to bring in the herd. Sure enough, the horses were scattered and scared, but he was able to round them all up and drive them into the holding corral. All of them, except one, the white one. He saw it standing in the far corner by the old round pen. It was just waiting there. They were able to close it inside. Then they rode back to the house. By the time they returned on foot, they each had a rifle. Uncle said the white horse was just there, staring at them as they approached, but when they got close enough, it did something that froze them. The horse started to smile at them. Not the way that you think. You know how sometimes a horse will move its mouth and it'll look like it's smiling? Nothing like that. He said it was peeking at them, smiling through the bars of the gate. That's when my uncle shot the horse. Afterwards, they dragged the body out, and they also lit the body on fire. He said the smoke that started coming off of it was thick and yellow, and the smell, it was like a plastic and rotten smell. To this day, my uncle says that it wasn't the horse getting up on two legs that freaked him out or anything. It was the way it smiled at them through the bars of the gate. When my uncle tried to find the guy he got the horse from, he couldn't find him. As far as he was told, the guy ended up skipping town a few days after the sale. My uncle was trying to get some answers, and of course, his money back. I wouldn't be here telling you about these things if it was a skinwalker that I came across. Matter of fact, I would go far beyond and say that most stories you hear online about people coming across them might not be true. Maybe it was just a spirit. Skinwalkers like to operate in secret. They don't like to be seen. That's why I said I'm not sure what this was. I mean, maybe it was one. I've been told so many stories about how someone goes to see a medicine man and they confirm it. I didn't. We didn't go, and we didn't find anything around. But I do sometimes wonder if it was just a spirit. I'm not sure, but here's my story. In New Mexico, on my res, I lived in a wooded area with steep hills and rocky parts with trees and small cedar bushes. It was around midnight, like around 11:30 p.m., and I live upstairs by myself, while my two sisters and my mom, they live downstairs and they each have their own room. I stay up all night mostly watching movies, playing video games, or just listening to music. So it was almost midnight and my dogs kept barking. They wouldn't be quiet. This usually meant that some random horse, or maybe some cow or something made their way into my fence, and I knew I was gonna have to chase them out. At least this is what always happened. But right when I got outside my back door, the environment just felt different. You know that gut feeling that you just know something is wrong, or that something is gonna happen? Well, on top of this, I swear I heard voices slightly up my hill. Now it's dark where the floodlights don't reach. I stand there thinking that I'm sure I just heard something, or maybe it was just in my head. So I stand out there for like 3 minutes, and I was about to go back in when I hear a man's voice. It calls my dog's name, but they spoke in Navajo. It was saying, "Come here, Badger. Come here, boy. Don't you remember? It's me." Of course, my dog wasn't paying attention. He kept aggressively barking and growling. I slowly back up into my door, as I heard so many stories before, that if you see something, you didn't. So you better believe I was taking my ass back inside and ignoring anything that was going on out here. I was trying my best not to make any noise, and so I closed my door. By the way, I have 3 dogs, and they all started barking. Looking back, maybe I was panicking and assumed that maybe somebody was breaking in. In those moments, you don't really know how you're gonna react. So my initial reaction was to text my sister, who works for the local police department. I was like, "I just heard a man's voice behind the house, up the hill." She doesn't reply, so I assume that she was on a call or something. As I'm inside trying to figure out what to do, I start to hear this loud object outside my front porch, and that's when my other sister texted if I heard anything. I told her I'm in the kitchen, and so she comes out and we both look outside the window. So much for not looking out the windows at night, or ignoring any strange noise you hear at night. I think in those situations, that's always going to be your initial reaction. So that's when we saw the white Home Depot bucket that I had used earlier that day. It had been thrown from wherever it was originally onto the dirt driveway. My sister looks at me and says, "The wind most likely blew it. Maybe that's why the dogs are barking. because of all the wind that's going on, and maybe it blew the bucket as well. I forgot to mention that everyone else was at work. My mom was a single mom, and she worked overnight, so it was just me and my sister. At that time, we were the only ones home. I didn't tell her about the voices I heard when I was outside, because again, I didn't want to make this into a big situation. What if it was just in my head, and I was just hearing things? I do think it's crazy how you try to justify everything when something creepy is going on. So I just went back to my room. I remember it was 3 in the morning, and I still hadn't gone to sleep, when I heard something fall right behind the wall that I was laying my head at. I put my phone down and listened. I heard it again in Navajo. I'm not sure what it said, but I knew it was talking to somebody else, because from what I could catch was, check door. I didn't hear my back door knob jiggle, or I didn't hear anybody trying to break in, but I did hear that person say, locked. In that moment, I was thankful that I locked my back door, because I couldn't remember if I had or not. It was quiet. I could just hear my heart thump in my ears, and I convinced myself it's time for bed, and I should just call it a night. By the way, this was during the summer, so summer nights would get hot, and I would have my windows cracked a little bit to get some air, but I forgot that one of my windows were open. I guess I eventually fell asleep, because just an hour later, like around 4:20 a.m., I started to smell rotten flesh. I quickly got up and looked around my room a bit. I got a really big headache. My head was pounding. Then I heard that voice again. It was in Navajo, and this time it was directly right outside my window. Whoever or whatever it was said, "Yes, I see." I went into straight fear. I felt paralyzed, so I just went underneath my covers and started praying. I started praying for protection and whatever is out here to leave, and that they were not welcome in my house. Without realizing, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping. I was happy it was daytime. It felt like a dream. I had to prove to myself it was real, and that it wasn't my mind playing tricks on me. So I went to check for tracks or signs about last night. There were no footprints or anything, only cow prints up where I heard the voices, and around my window as well, and also on my sister's window. That night I was skeptical, but nothing happened, and my older sister did text me back that morning. She said that when she got home, she looked around but didn't find anything, nothing even tampered with, or signs of a break-in, and that maybe I was just dreaming from where I don't get enough sleep. Like I said, I don't think it was a skinwalker, because I don't think I would be alive right now. And why would they come after us? 2, I don't think it was a thief, and I only say this because of that putrid smell that came inside my room. Some people say that when spirits are around, they give off some sort of smell. What do you think? One time when I was in Phoenix, Arizona, a friend of mine invited me and some other friends to a barbecue on his res. So I decided it would be a fun event to go to. There was about 10 of us that drove out that day. I drove my Chevy Camaro and took my girlfriend with me. The other cars were mostly pairs of friends, for a total of 5 cars. Anyhow, so we depart from Phoenix and drive for a few hours past Mesa, towards my friend's res. When we got there, we could see that it was very secluded. The entrance to it had nothing around it for miles. We drive down the dusty road until we got to a group of houses sitting in the middle of nowhere. This was where my friend and his extended family lived. The surrounding area was desert, just plain cactus and rock desert for as far as you can see. There was a cluster of sagebrush about 500 yards off to the right. But besides that, the houses and the road, there was nothing else. The night started off great. We had a great time eating all types of food and BSing with each other. Then about 10 p.m. or so, someone mentioned that they thought they heard something off in the dark. And of course, that started off the scary stories from my friend's family. They started telling us a few stories about a half horse, half man that has been spotted by a few of them. Aside from this story, they told us a few more, but apparently they were not scary enough for my girlfriend. Once she heard them, she said she wanted to find one of these things. So she started wandering off towards the sagebrush way off, and I figured I would let her go stand around in the dark. I let her get all the way to the bushes before I went after her, as I started to feel guilty. Once I caught up with her, I convinced her that there was nothing out there, and that we should head back. After arguing for about 5 minutes, we went back to our friends. Once we got there, we all said our goodbyes and went out. This was about midnight, and it was very dark out there. The only lights being the few at the house cluster, and our vehicle lights. Besides those two sources of light, it was pitch black for miles. We happened to be the last car ready, and so we were also the last in our 5-car caravan. We got about 10 yards past the house cluster when my headlamps and everything else started to go out. This is the first time since I have owned a vehicle that this happened. I thought nothing of it. I called my friends in the first car, told them to wait up, and inspected the fuse box. I found the issue was just a blown fuse, so I replaced it with a spare and turned my lights back on and continued down the road. About 20 yards down, my lights cut out again. At this point, my girlfriend was freaking out in the passenger seat. I told her there was nothing scary going on, and it was just a wire causing a short. After calling my friends at the front again and replacing the fuse yet again, we made it all the way to the end of the road, at the edge of the res, before it happened again. I replaced the fuse with my second to last one, and quickly sped off and went home. The ride home was uneventful, just a dark desert all around as usual in Arizona. Nothing else happened while we traveled home. However, as I dropped her off, right when I pulled into her driveway, the fuse happened to blow out again. So I popped my last fuse in, and I told her I was going to head out, and I'll see her later. That was the last time the fuse went out. I went home to my apartment, crashed out, and slept awesome. When I woke up the next day, I noticed I had a bunch of missed calls from my girlfriend. I called her back, and she immediately answered, telling me to come over and whatnot. I went over there and was greeted in the kitchen. Both of them were looking as pale as ever. When I asked what happened, they told me. Apparently, after I dropped her off last night, the dog they had started acting strange. She said that when she went upstairs to sleep, that the dog was barking at something downstairs. She said that she thought she heard a noise, but she couldn't tell over the dog barking. Her roommate then told me that she was lying in bed trying to go to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she would hear weird noises around her, like if something was inside her room. She explained that she heard the dog barking at something as well, and had never felt anything like that before. They told me about what happened in the morning. When they opened the door to let the dog out, a healthy looking dove flew in after the dog went out. The dove took about 10 steps into the house, then fell over and died. I didn't think much of it, and I took her back to my place to get her mind off of it. This worked until I dropped her off again that night. The next day she told me that the dog still barked all night. Her roommate and her thought they heard things, and she also said that every time she closed her eyes, she would see some horrible images. At that time, I decided to ask my native friend what he thought about it. Instead of him laughing about it, like I expected him to, he instead told me that she better burn some sage in the house, and that he was going to tell his family to burn some as well. Apparently, they were going to drive out any bad spirits. After telling her what he said, she quickly bought some, and did so. That was the last time I heard about her trying to find something supernatural. And after that day, she said everything calmed down. I guess be careful what you wish for. And even if you're not native, apparently the spirits don't discriminate. Y'all stay safe out there. start with some background. In 2017, I was 28. I lived in Texas. I grew up in a small town, but I always liked a simpler life. I'm currently living at my grandmother's house. She left it to my dad before she passed. It's a little tough because I mostly raise the animals that she left behind, and there isn't much money to be made by it, but I wasn't trying to stay for more than a year. It's a log cabin with 3 enclosures. Chickens, pigs, and some goats, which I don't bother with much because goats. It's pretty far from pretty much anything. There's a town about 20 minutes by car, and that's taking a guess, and there's some neighbors a couple of miles down the road, but I'm surrounded mostly by trees. The cabin is in a big clearing, but the road out of here has forest on either side of it. Anyways, 3.5 months into my stay, I had gotten the hang of screwing around with the animals. Mostly I would gather eggs. I sold some of the pigs and I would mostly gather eggs. I decided recently to try and butcher one. It's pretty quiet out here. I have a gun, but the truth is that I don't even care to use it, let alone carry it with me. So the day comes and I want some fresh pork, so I take the pig out of the pen and I tie it to a pole not far from the house. Then I shoot it. I thought it would be easier, but hell no, it wasn't. The thing runs around screaming for a good 2 minutes before falling. Fuck me. So the pig finally dies. I have butchered with my uncle before, and I get through it pretty efficiently. I have butchered with my uncle before, and I figure I could do it. The only problem is that I'm a dumbass, if you can't tell. Especially when I'm not being supervised. So I put everything into a bucket, and guess what? I forgot it outside. I forgot to mention that after the pig had finally kicked the bucket, no pun intended, eventually everything else around me seemed to stop too, even the chickens. Now I brushed it off as them seeing a brutal crime and didn't pay any attention to it. I take the meat to the old butcher's block and I cut it up the best I can. I throw away whatever I don't need. I store some of it and I cook the best parts the same day. I screw around for the rest of the day on the computer, mostly looking at pictures. It's a hobby of mine. Around sundown, I was upstairs to where the bedroom is, and I was just relaxing with the window open looking at the sky. I was getting pretty intrigued by some sounds that began to come from the woods. I thought that maybe if I was lucky, I would get to see some sort of wolf. And I thought to myself while hearing these noises, the howling is awful these days. I actually never been such an outdoor kind of guy, so I'm not familiar with the forest creatures. The window overlooks what is the back of the property, but if I stick my head out, I can see most of the left side and part of the right side too. The clearing is also larger at the back. I'm keeping an eye out for the wolves, hoping to see them all in their majesty. By now it's dark, and I finally see some movement in the tree line. But then I think, well, that's a funny looking wolf. And then I think to myself, is that a Sasquatch? I'm clearly seeing something standing up as it walks out of the damn trees, maybe 8 feet tall. I never even believed in these things. As it makes its way to the clearing, I flinch and make some sort of gasping noise, and I see one of its legs. It's bent backwards. It also heard me. Well, little curiosity was keeping my fear in check. I realized 2 things. Both of the legs are bent backwards, not just one. And 2, it heard me from about 300 feet away. What seems like forever passed, and then it bent over and started running towards the side of the cabin, technically towards where I killed the pig, which I didn't realize at the time, as it was at the left side but at the front. As it's running, I catch some light hitting it from the side, and I notice the snout, not too large, and its ears pointing up. I feel bamboozled as I wanted to see a real wolf and not see God's curse to mankind. I'm freaking out at this point. I close the window and I grab my gun. I put a dresser against the door. I may have mentioned that I'm on the 2nd floor, but I obviously and clearly wasn't thinking straight. Meanwhile, the pigs start raising hell, and after a while, I'm wondering if it's gonna come for me. I hear a loud crash, more like a smack, and then the sound of footsteps and really heavy running, like this thing was running. I look outside without going too close to the window. This werewolf thing is running away with a fucking pig under its arm. The thing seems shredded at the back of it. I still remember those heavy footsteps. It wasn't even 10 p.m. by this point, and I had to spend the rest of the night on the bed with my rifle in my hands, just to feel like it wasn't in the room with me. Finally, morning came. I was able to make my way out of the room and downstairs. Thank the heavens there's no sign of anything trying to get in, but I think I would have heard it if it was trying to get in. I check around as best as I can through the windows to see if anything is near the house. All I see is the chicken pen and the pig pen, and the goats were too far to the side to see from the front. There's blood everywhere, parts of pig all around the place. The chickens are gone. I can only assume at this point that the goats suffer the same fate. I muster all my courage and run out to the Jeep. I book it out of there and go into town, but I realized that I had a phone and I didn't call anyone. Say what you will about me, but anyone who has been terrified to that degree will know that under such circumstances you do whacked out stuff. And to be fair, the phone wasn't even charged or in the room when I saw what I later researched, and I called it what a lot of people call it now, a dog man. The name still gives me shivers. I finally get into town. I have no phone. My parents live 3 towns away from here. I don't know the number off my heart. You might be wondering, how do you not know your parents or your home phone number? Basically, the lesson here is, don't be lazy, like me. So I was basically stuck in town at this point. I make my way to a grocery store because I basically only got friendly with a guy who stacks the shelves there. He's a few years younger than me, but we have a lot of things in common. I go in, I see him, and I start walking up. He turns and sees me. His eyes go wide. He then says, "Hey man, you're really pale. Are you alright?" Long story short, I told him everything. He says that I can stick around with him for a while. I start kicking a can outside until he gets off work. I follow him to his place. He lives with his parents, but they're super sweet people. They put me up without even a second thought, and I was a stranger to them. He hands me his laptop and tells me to try and look up whatever I saw, or what might be wrong with me. He then says, try the dog man and see what comes up. So I looked it up and I see a bunch of results, testimonies and all sorts of stuff that confirm what I saw. And apparently they're not friendly like dogs are. I start to freak out again. My friend sees this and he tells me to just chill. He puts on music and brings up some pizza before asking some more details. I ask him how he knew what these things are. He said that he believes in them. Says that he heard them as a kid. Before he looks up a Sasquatch call, the stuff comes on like at 1,000,000 decibels on his bass sound system. It scares the hell out of both of us, but it kinda just lightened the mood. It made us laugh a bit, but this is also where I got an idea. And looking back, it's also where I already started screwing up. I thought I was gonna man up and get revenge on these things, but if you looked up Dogman, you know where this is going. The internet says that they hate loud noises like air horns, and that they also tend to hunt dogs and cats. I ended up asking if he can lend me some money. He agrees. I go out and I buy the cheapest loud sound system that I can find. I end up sticking around for a couple of days downloading sound files, putting them on a flash drive, trying to get familiar with all these legends about this dog man, some animal sounds, and all that type of stuff. I then head back to my house with my chest in the air, with a plan in mind. I get in the door and the windows seem untouched, so I feel a little better about it. All is good. It's time to set up. I take the sound system outside, and I put it about 30 feet from the back of the cabin near the window. I throw the extension cords through the bedroom window and then go back inside. I barricade the ground floor as best as I can. I basically shove furniture around. I gather up all my things into this bedroom. I go up and barricade the door. I connect my laptop, and I wait. It was still quite early during the day when all this was done, and I felt very uneasy waiting. I almost backed out, realizing that I was being very dumb, and I didn't care to go outside. When the sun finally started to set, I decided that it was my time to put my plan in action. I started to find cat noises on my flash drive, playing them for a good 20 minutes on and off. I made sure that I can get enough time in between to listen to any possible sounds. Then I hear it. It seems to be working. The thing from before comes out of the woods a bit further, to the side from the last time, on all fours. I was getting the chills, but I wanted to get rid of this thing. I had pulled the curtain and the windows as much as I could, without severing the extension cable. The sun was down by now, but the moon was still bright in the sky. I could see it better this time. I hadn't realized what kind of beast this was. This thing was ripped, unholy. I was shaking. I put the cat sounds on with the lower volume. It pinpointed the sound instantly and started walking towards it. I turned the volume up to full and I waited. I had to pick something, a very loud noise. I thought about using a noise that you would see on social media, but I kind of went against that. I sat there and waited. As it got closer, it kind of took its time before standing up again, and it was actually walking over. Once it was about within 5 feet of the speakers, I turned it on. What happened next left me in too much shock to laugh. The thing jumped in pure pain and most likely fear, easily 5 feet into the air, and it landed on its backside. Not that it stayed down. I felt the thud as this thing hit the ground before scrambling to its feet on all fours and running. I did find it funny, but the sound that it made hitting the ground did scare me. I was thinking of how much that this thing must weigh, how much muscle it has on it. But what really scared me was how it growled when it left. It was that kind of growling that just pissed it off more than anything. I didn't fall asleep that night, and a few hours later, I found out that this was a good reason. 2 came out the second time. Both were close in size. Maybe the second one was smaller, just a little bit. And I also think it has a slightly different color. Other than that, both of them are the same. I get the sounds again, but I put a dog barking directly on loud volume. They charged at this thing. I maxed the volume while basically being frozen in fear. Once they got close to the speakers, I turned it on. It was enough to stop them in their tracks, but it didn't do what I thought it was gonna do. They basically just kind of shielded themselves from it. I went into fight or flight mode. I grabbed my rifle and opened the window as much as I could. They were able to pinpoint me right away, despite the sound from the music. I pulled the trigger. I hit the brownish one in the chest. It just flinched. I was trying to empty the whole clip into these things, so I was just going small. Small side note, their gaze is that of the devils. I have never seen anything that evil. I hit it again, both times in the chest. It tried to give me a quick hateful glare before running the other way on 2 legs. The other one glared at me too, but started to turn to follow the other. I, on the other hand, was not done. I shot at that one too. I'm not sure, but it looked like I hit it in the shoulder. But if I did, it just seemed to shrug it off. I fired my last round, and I don't know if I hit anything. I felt like I won a battle, but I was extremely shook up. All this to do nothing basically to them. I think I made the right choice when I got my stuff in a hurry, and threw the bookcase in front of the door, ran downstairs and broke a window just to get out. I got into my Jeep and started to leave. I went to my friend's house directly. His parents were shocked at the state of me. I left in the morning, and I just went back to my parents. I had barely told my friend anything, and it took me at least a week to tell my parents anything close to what happened, without sounding insane, that is. They of course didn't believe me, and they were just mad that I screwed up my grandmother's old house. This is what happens, so don't fuck around with anything that seems unnatural. This happened back in 1999. I was part of the Zuni high school football team, and 10 of us were going to take part of a sports camp held in Wind River. It was called Native Vision. So we took the long drive up to Wyoming with a school bus. The trip was fun. Being kids from the rest, we were excited to go. It took us 2 days to get there, and whenever we got there, we were the first ones. The campground was at some school with an old church. I think it was called St. Stephen or something like that, but I heard it was an old Indian school. We ended up staying in some teepees, which was pretty cool, because none of us ever slept in one of those. The first night we got there, we just settled in. That's until we heard some kids playing by the church, and we thought someone was playing basketball. Some of us walked to the middle area where the sounds were coming from. It was towards the evening, and sort of dark as we got closer to the sounds. We saw a little kid running after a ball at least 50 feet in front of us. One of my friends said, "Hey," and he started waving at the kid, but the kid just looked at us and ran back behind the building. Just then, the sound stopped, and it became dead quiet. Too quiet. So we all continued to look, and when we got to the basketball courts, there was no one there. We all looked at each other like, this is weird, but we all didn't think nothing of it. So we just brushed it off and went back to our teepee. All of us agreed that those might have been some ghost kids, but that didn't stop us from enjoying our camp. As we got back to the campgrounds, some more native schools started to come in. The camp lasted for 3 days, and we made friends with the locals. They were amazed that we spoke in our native tongue, and it was cool with all of us. I remember some of the locals got mad at us because we were playing around and mispronouncing some words, but as the last day came, we all said our goodbyes to our new friends. On the day that everybody left at once, the teepees were going to come down. Since we stayed pretty far, they ended up letting us spend one more night at the campgrounds. We took 2 of the teepees that were left for us and settled in one more time. But this night was way different than the first night. With all the teepees gone, the camp area was just one big field and a line of trees surrounding the area. As night fell, we parked our bus next to the teepees and were killing time wandering the school. We didn't think too much of it. Me and my bro were chilling by the school just listening to the river that just flowed by. We were talking, and that's when we heard someone, or something, scream. We froze for a bit. Just then the others heard the same thing and walked over to us. "Did y'all hear that?" We said yes, and as we were all talking, we heard the scream again. But this time, it sounded like a woman crying. We all ran back to the teepee and told our coach what we heard. He told us to stay around the teepee, so that's exactly what we did. As we were getting ready for bed, all of us were telling our stories about the camp. Then, we heard the scream again, but this time it was more than one. It got quiet, so all of us stepped outside to look around. As we did, we saw some sort of white figure standing in the middle of the field. "Oh shit, look," one of us said. Just then, this white figure, it looked like it began to run towards us. I guess we didn't move or run because we were all in shock, but as it got closer, it just disappeared. We all then freaked out and ran to the teepee. All of us were scared, so our coach looked out as we all followed behind him. We looked where the figure was standing, but there was nothing. As we all turned around, we saw it again, standing far in a tree. This time our coach also saw it, but he freaked out. At least I think he did, because he told us to be strong and ignore it. So we all went back inside. We sat in the teepee holding our arrowheads. Arrowhead and our beliefs protect us from bad things. Just then, we heard a loud sound by where the bus was at. We determined it was the doors on the bus. All of us got fed up and looked around. As we all got out, the noise stopped. The door was wide open. As we looked around and inside, we heard something underneath it. We flashed the light underneath the bus. All of a sudden, a big black dog started to run out underneath the bus. It started running towards the river, and it also made a weird sound like a human laugh. By that time, we all ran back inside the teepee, trying to forget everything. The coach ended up saying that we were not here alone. Someone, or something, was with us. He ended up getting all of us to pray and to forget about what we just saw. We couldn't even sleep that night. We sat in there whispering to each other as we heard tappings on the bus windows. We tried to ignore everything. This went on the whole night. The next morning, as the sun rose, we all made an offering of food and cornmeals. And just like that, we all packed up everything and left. We began our long trip back to Zuni. In my mind, those were just spirits, the kids, the woman, and even the dog. I'm not exactly sure how to explain it, but I'm thinking it had something to do with that old Indian school. This is what I mostly remember about our camping trip in the Wind River Reservation. I never gone camping again, or out in the woods at night after this experience. A few friends and I had a long weekend, 5 days off from school, and we decided to go camping. We packed a big 10-person tent. There were 5 of us, 2 guys and 3 girls, and we loaded up my buddy's truck. He and I had some experience being outdoors, camping, hiking, hunting, and he's an army vet. So we packed really well and had all sorts of things like a propane stove grill and so much other stuff. We were in it for the whole weekend. We left Wednesday afternoon and parked the truck in a small town, and we started hiking into the woods to find a spot. It was a normal hike until we got about 4 or 5 miles in. The first time we noticed something strange was when we came into a little clearing in the woods with a big pond or tiny lake in it. We stepped into the open area and everything just stopped. There were no birds chirping, no squirrels running around. Even the clouds and the wind seemed to stop moving. My buddy and I looked at each other. Well, shit, there's gotta be a predator nearby. And so we took out our handguns, just in case. I never seen a bear out here in Georgia, so we figured it was a mountain lion, or maybe even coyotes. My friend and I were looking around the edge of the clearing, and he grabbed me. He nodded across the water, and when I looked, I saw what seemed to be a woman, standing just at the tree line. She was maybe 150 yards away. We just assumed that she must live somewhere nearby, and so we continued walking past the water in the clearing. As we headed back into the woods, I looked over my shoulder at where she was standing. The sounds of the forest returned once we got into the trees. We made a campsite about 2 miles past that, as it was getting late, and we didn't want to be stuck building camp in the dark. We got everything unpacked, and we started building a fire. Popped a few beers and sat down to hang out. There was a girl I was interested in on this trip, and we had been talking for a bit. And after the sun went down, we snuck away from the fire. We started fooling around, and after a few minutes, she stopped and looked at me funny. I asked what was wrong, and she said, "Nothing. It just got really quiet." We both quickly went back outside to the fire. The others hadn't noticed anything strange. On the first morning, we found that the propane stove had been turned on, but it wasn't ignited, and it had gone empty overnight. None of us had used it. The second morning, we noticed some things had gone missing. A lantern that was left outside by the fire was gone. We figured we just misplaced things, or someone had used them and put them somewhere else. During the second full day, Friday, we were looking for a waterfall. We had read online it was in the area. We were following the river upstream when everything went silent again. My buddy nudged at me as we were walking and indicated up to the top of the hill next to the river. I looked up through the trees, and I was just able to make out the figure of the same woman, same clothes and all, just standing. I couldn't tell if she was looking at us or not, but she was just standing there. My buddy then told the girls that he thought he saw a mountain lion following us, and he was gonna go scare it off. He hustled up the hill making a lot of noise, and came back about 10 minutes later. He told the girls that he scared it off, but later on, he told me that the woman wasn't there when he got up there. We found the waterfall, and we put it out of our minds as everybody started having fun. We eventually made it back to camp, but when we got there, it was a mess. It wasn't completely trashed, but it was clear something had gotten into our stuff. We told the girls it was most likely raccoons. We both took our guns to bed with us. At night, everything went sideways. I remember waking up because my crush was squeezing my arm. We had been sleeping cuddled up together. I opened my eyes, and she hushed me before I could ask what was wrong. It was completely silent. I looked across the tent and my buddy was sitting halfway up looking around. We both stayed awake for the next 2 hours until the sun started coming up, and then we all packed our stuff and headed out. The entire hike back into the town was silent. There were a couple of points I thought I saw the woman through the trees, but never got a clear sight of her. We completely avoided the lake and got back to the truck in what seemed like half the time it took to get there. After we were safely on the road back home, the girls and my buddy all started sharing moments they thought they heard, saw a woman all weekend, but were all too freaked out to mention it. The crazy part was that none of us could describe her face. It's almost like it was blurry. I have no idea who she was, but I have never gone camping or hiking at night again. My mom told me a story about an old medicine man who was blind, living out alone in the woods, in a home near Anadarko, Oklahoma. People said that he didn't like visitors much, except for his nephew. This nephew of him would take care of him, do favors for him, and bring him groceries and stuff like that. Apparently, he only lived in the front half of the home. There was a hallway that led to the other half of the house, but it was covered with a thick buffalo robe. The nephew would ask him what was back there, and the medicine man would simply tell him not to ever go back there, and he was very stern about this as well. The nephew one night came to visit his uncle, and no one was home. You know how it goes. Curiosity got the better of him. He decided to go behind the robe, and he noticed newspapers all over the floor. It was also really nasty, and he mentioned that there were bones that could be seen among the newspaper, and there was also a bunch of trash everywhere. He then noticed a door leading into another room. Assuming his uncle might be in there, he walked over and tried the handle, but it was stuck. But after some effort, it gave way. The air behind the door was different, he said. The smell hit him first. Dirt, old sage, something burning, and something else. A mixture of a bunch of things. There was no light inside of the room. It was only lit by the sunlight that was still out there. He also mentioned there were newspapers covering a single window. On one side of the room, there looked to be a stand. There were more bones on top. They were all bundled up together. There was also a few bundles of feathers tied together hanging from the ceiling. Something about it wasn't right. He said that he felt creeped out, so he just backed out quickly and quietly closed the door the best he could. He looked around the hall and saw another door at the end. It was leading outside. Assuming his uncle was in the backyard, he walked through it and noticed a trail leading into the forest. He looked around the yard and couldn't see his uncle nowhere. As he was standing out there, he heard it, drumming, and the voice of his uncle, singing. Sure enough, he followed the trail, and after a few minutes, he started getting closer to his uncle's drumming and singing. He followed the sound into a clearing, and that's when he saw his uncle. He was sitting cross-legged, chanting and playing a drum, except he wasn't by himself. He was talking to a huge owl, tall as a man. At least that's what the nephew said. That's when the owl turned to stare at the nephew. It let out a screech. The medicine man, or uncle, quickly started pleading with the owl, begging it not to kill his nephew. That's when the nephew ran. Didn't look back at all. He ran straight home, told his parents everything. And you guessed it, they went and told the police. By the time the police went out there, which was the following day, the police report itself had been circulated around the whole town. And that's how my mom found out about it. She said when the police arrived at the property to investigate, they found that there was a buffalo robe in the hallway. But the smell, it wasn't how the nephew had described. The police described it as raw, mixed with sage, and something else. They pulled back the robe. The hallway was just like the nephew described though. Bones and newspapers. And the medicine man, they found him, dead. The police said it was natural causes, but the people who lived around there, they said there must have been some other things going on. And as for the nephew and the rest of his family, my mom said they ended up moving out of town shortly after, and it's been years since anybody has seen them. So you think us normal folks on the res have some scary stories? Ask your grandparents. But you want to know who's seen, maybe even experienced some of the scariest things out here on the res? That would be our native police officers, rangers, and EMTs. They have some of the strangest stories. I mean, they are the ones who respond to incidents first on the res, especially any and all incidents with mysterious things. Even phone calls about a ghost and other things you hear. I would like to share a story with you all. It's not that scary, but you'll see. A couple years ago, my uncle used to work as a policeman on our res, on Sweetgrass First Nation. He would drive around the town overnight. Sometimes at night, like around 9 or 10, he would come over and have some coffee and talk with me and my mom, since we lived by the area that he would patrol. One night when he came over, he told my mom that he had to tell her something that was bothering him for a few days, and he didn't want to tell anyone else because most people brush off his stories and beliefs. He told us how sometimes he parks up at the water treatment plant to get an overview, saying that he could see a few blocks from where he was. He said that one time he saw it, a spirit, a black shadow, roaming the town at night. He said he saw it a few times, but never did anything, nor get closer. He would just sit in his car and watch it. He said sometimes it looked like a tall black figure, a person who would walk to every house, looking through the windows. He wouldn't see it every day, just here and there. He said one time he saw it drag itself up the side of a house, just to look into a second-story window. Now that part did make me a bit nervous, but not really scared. I just don't look out the window at night no matter what I hear now. Like I said, it was nothing too scary until he told us the following. He said every time that he saw it, something would happen. Sometimes it was within the next few hours. Other times it was a day or two. But always, someone would pass away. And not just in the houses it went around. And that's what freaked him out the most. He could never find a connection between the homes it was near and the death that followed. He said he would see it going through one neighborhood, but the death would occur across town, or even sometimes in some other community nearby. He just started assuming that every time he saw that shadow, something bad was coming. And not just bad, really weird and strange overall. Like for example, he said some of the people who passed away, mind you, at first he didn't record them, but once it clicked, he started making connections between the sightings and somebody dying. He said that one time, an older woman was found sitting in her chair at home with every single mirror that she had in her house broken. We got there for a welfare check request from her family. There was no sign of forced entry. Her family only mentioned that she kept complaining about something, watching her from the reflections. Some other occasion, a man was found in his trailer with every window covered with cedar and ash. Even the vents were stuffed with sage, but he still died. His door was locked from the inside. and one elder in the community said he knew it was coming. He just didn't know what it wanted. But the scariest was when he found a teenager hanging in a tree behind his house, just a few feet off the ground. A suicide, maybe. There wasn't a note, no signs of struggle, no dragging, nothing. He was just there. His family swore he didn't have any mental struggles. As a matter of fact, they mentioned that he had just made breakfast that morning. He was joking with his nieces, laughing about his truck not starting. Another weird thing about it was that the dogs wouldn't go near that tree, not even after he was taken down. A medicine man who came to offer prayers wouldn't step near that tree. He looked at it and he said, "That's not where he died. That's where I left him." And nobody's used that space of land ever since. And the family ended up moving because they felt uncomfortable. I mean, who wouldn't move, right? He said sometimes when it would be quiet, they could still hear the rope creaking, swinging. My uncle said he eventually told his sergeant about it. Not because he wanted to sound superstitious, but simply because it kept happening. They were short-staffed, so his sergeant decided to come with him one night to see if he saw it for himself. But that never happened. As a matter of fact, that was the last time my uncle tried to have anything to do with it. He said it was almost like it knew they were planning something. The night they were supposed to go out together, something happened. He said at the moment that he parked at the same spot, he had this feeling like someone was watching him. He waited for his sergeant, and after about 10 minutes he got a phone call. It was from his sergeant, saying that he wasn't going to be able to make it, and that he was going to be tied up with a family dispute going on. My uncle then said that he was going to step out of the vehicle for just a minute. And that's when it happened. He caught movement in the rear view mirror. That shadow figure was there in his back seat. He said he couldn't move. He said it felt like something was holding him in place, so he just closed his eyes. After a few minutes, he opened them, and it was gone. He started the engine of the car and drove straight to the station, and he never went back to that spot again. And so that's actually why he came by here, to tell us to never go up there, and to stay indoors from now on. When I was younger, I was told not to trust anyone, not even friends, because you don't know whose family or parents know witchcraft. Some of these res people don't work directly with witchcraft, but their parents or someone in their family does. I was told that these people will have their kids help them by taking a piece of your personal belongings, clothing, and even hair, which is the worst because they can wrap your hair around the bones of dead people and turn them into like a doll. They then go to the cemetery and they do some other things. I was told a few things like this, and there's a reason why I'm telling you, which I will get to. The next part my parents didn't tell me, but my uncle did. He said that a skinwalker is around when the dogs are barking, and if the air begins to smell like a dead person, that means that they are near. You want to know when a skinwalker is even closer? You will know because you'll get paralyzed from your body down. But you can still see. The difficult part is to try to speak. He said, imagine the wind being knocked out of you while you try to regain your breath and speak. Something along those lines. So anyways, when I was in a dorm in Arizona, our school was part of a cemetery. We would sometimes wake up around 5 in the morning and run around the school and the houses around as well. There was this one guy, I'm gonna call him Jeremy. He kinda kept to himself. Jeremy and this other buddy would always be together. They would sit together during study hall, or sometimes walk back from eating dinner at the same time. One day, out of nowhere, that dude got really sick. I'm talking about throwing up, convulsing, and everything else above. The nurse came and got him, and he was out for like 2 days. Nobody else got sick, just him. We all assumed it was the food, but the rest of us had ate the same thing as well. Now when he came back, that's when I started getting a little bit sus. I think that's what young people call it nowadays. Sus for suspect. Well, when he came back, he wouldn't hang out with Jeremy anymore. Now this Jeremy guy was weird. I only went near his room a few times, but every time that I did, there was always something going on. It just felt really weird going around him. Some of the other guys said that they heard him talking at night, but no one else was with him. Some of them said that he was praying or playing music or something, because this one time his neighbor complained to the staff. But when the staff came to check, nobody could hear anything. Now I'm not going to say this guy's family was involved in some sort of witchcraft or anything, but like I said, I had my own opinion. Then, one of our colleagues went missing. I didn't really know him, but the rumor was that, according to Jay, who was the janitor, which was the one who would share all the gossip with us, Jay simply said that he was snatched one morning when he was out running. He said this happened on the cemetery side. That's where they found his shirt, his jeans, and shoes, but not him. After all of that, we were not allowed to go outside after hours, basically anytime it was dark. On top of this, the campus ended up getting 2-3 securities driving around ever since that guy went missing. I honestly think Jeremy, or maybe his parents, were involved in witchcraft. I just had this weird vibe from him. I know the story wasn't scary, or your common Skinwalker jumping in my face type of stuff, but I guess it's more of a warning. You never know who's doing what behind closed doors. Another creepy experience is when I say we, I mean my mom and I. We needed to go pick up my dad on the other side of town. Something about his car breaking down, and I didn't want my mom to go alone, knowing all the stories and hearing about what happens to single drivers at night. That shit is real, whether you believe it or not. I wouldn't risk it. Plus, it would help keep my mom company, and safety. Well, as I remember, we were going through a dirt road. We came up from the hill. That's when we saw something it was going across the road like a trash bag. It was floating in a strange way. Honestly, I can't even describe it, but I think this had something to do with what we came across. So we keep going and my mom was tired. I could tell that she wanted to take a 5-minute power nap. And so we pulled into a small motel and we switched seats because the passenger side had more leg room and it had more space to move around whenever you moved the seat back. I stayed up because we were only stopping for a few minutes. And when you're younger, you can actually not sleep and function like normal. Don't ask me how that's holding up now though. Anyways, as we park, it's very quiet and dark outside, and I'm up and looking around. There was a tree with bushes across from us, and I swear, I saw something that was crouching there. I say this because I saw something moving. Maybe it was just an animal. Cows and horses roam around there. So I turned on the high beams to get a better look. And that's when I saw it. Well, not really. Whatever it was, I saw something. I quickly tapped my mom to wake her up, and in the split second that I looked back, it was gone. My mom then sat up slowly, still half asleep, and I told her what I saw. She just looked at me and said, "Let's go, we'll stop somewhere else." We ended up switching seats through the inside instead of having to step outside. So we kept going and nothing else happened. But about an hour later, my mom said that she was getting sleepy again. So we ended up pulling over at a rest stop-like area. My mom also told me to get some sleep. I pulled my seat back a little bit and I was laying down for a few minutes, just thinking. It was so weird how it happened. For some reason, I was kind of stuck, no movement, and my mom was trying to speak to me, but I thought she was sleep talking. She started slowly moving her hand across to me. Everything was happening in slow motion. When I was able to look at her, I will always remember that black figure standing right behind the driver window. That's when I was able to say, "Mom," and right then and there, she shot up and started the truck so fast and put the gears quick and floored it. She looked at me and said, "Did you see it?" I was kind of shocked, but my heart was beating fast. And then she said she was trying to say something, but whatever this thing was, had control of both of us in some sort of way. This is just one of many reasons why you shouldn't drive in the res alone, or sleep where it's not lit, or where there's no people around. I used to hate living in Arizona so much that I had to get some sleeping pills so I wouldn't hear the dogs barking, the doorknob shaking, or windows or walls being scratched. I'm not sure what it was that night, but my mom never said anything about it again. Here's a story about when I used to drink and sleep on the streets in Farmington. It's crazy how one can try to stop drinking or addictions with something, but sometimes all it can take is a story. I used to camp by the river by a place they called the X. I used to hear something walking through the heavy bushes, the ones that have thorns. You might know the area. Well, I would hear something walking through there every other night, but I never saw anything. But one day, I was talking with an older Navajo man, and he told me not to camp at the river. He told me that he used to do that as well. Until one day, early in the morning, before the sun came up, he said he was near where I was camping at, and he said he heard some splashing in the water, so he went over there to go look. And what he told me was that there was 4 people in the water. They were washing paint off of themselves, with animal skins hanging from the trees, and that there was a black figure watching over them. He said he freaked out what he saw and was slowly backing off until he stepped on a stick and it snapped. Then they all looked towards him, and he said all he remembers is that this black figure turning into a painted man with a wolf skin on. Then he got dizzy and passed out. He said he woke up in the afternoon with the sun on his face, and then he noticed parts of his hair was cut off and his fingernails were clipped. After he told me that, I stopped sleeping by the river. Now, this next part, you might not believe me, but that man, he's no longer alive. After all that happened, all I could ever think was he ended up getting cursed because of what he saw. I don't go nowhere near this area no more, and I also don't drink anymore. When I was about 8 or 9, we lived southeast of Crown Point, in the Misas in Borrego Pass. There was a woman who used to come over to visit my auntie. She lived with us and took care of us while our parents worked. Well, this woman started asking for money, and my auntie turned her away, and she asked her not to come by anymore. A few nights later, my mom was doing laundry in Gallup, so it was just us kids and my auntie at home. We lived in a double white trailer, close to a misa at the edge of the school campus. Our bedrooms were at the east end of the trailer, and my mom's room was at the west end by the back door. So in the middle of the night, my auntie heard the back door open and close. She thought my mom had came home, so she got up to take my sister to her, and when she went back there, it was dark, and no one was there. So she checked the back door, and it was still locked. Thinking she must have been mistaken, she went back to her room and back to bed with the baby. A few minutes later, she heard the door again, so this time, she got up and went to check again. It was still dark and the door was still locked. Then she got scared, said a prayer, and went back to bed. In the morning, she was telling my mom everything that she heard and experienced. My mom was scared as well, so they brought a medicine man to find out what happened, just to be on the safe side. He came one evening, and I was sitting on the couch listening to the grown-ups talking. He told my mom and auntie that the old woman had sent a cheetah into our house, to take our hair and pieces of clothing to perform some sort of witchcraft. I remember being terrified and thinking of this evil spirit wandering around in our home at night. I was only 9, with my 7-year-old sister, my 2-year-old brother and baby sister, and disabled auntie. The medicine man ended up having a prayer to cleanse the home, and he even found a bundle of our things buried high on the mesa, under a dead tree. This happens to be one of the scariest memories that I have. Did you know that more than 200 people died in the 1972 Rapid City flood? It's also known as the Black Hills flood, and some of their bodies were never found. People say that spirits are lingering around from everything that happened. This is a real event. Google can be your best friend if you don't believe me. I myself wasn't alive when this happened, but my family did tell me about it. I even did some research, and it's all because of what my friend told me. She called me today to tell me of a scary incident that happened to her friend. It happened after the powwow last night. My friend and I saw each other at the Black Hills powwow at the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center in Rapid City, South Dakota, and we ended up talking for a bit. Anyways, she said her friend, who lives just about 3 blocks from the Civic Center, she was walking home after the powwow was over, and as she was getting closer to the bridge, the one that goes over Rapid Creek, she heard somebody from the side of the bridge saying, "Hey, can you help me?" So she stopped before she got into the dark spot where the street light is dim, and she looked towards the side of the bridge where the voice came from, and as her eyes focused, she could see a dark figure standing at the corner of the bridge. And even though she couldn't really see the face, she said it felt like it was looking at her. It ended up asking her to help him, but this time he said, "Can you get my mom? I need her." She froze because the voice sounded weird. Just then a car passes by, and when the headlights from the car hits the bridge, she noticed that the figure is gone. But as soon as the car passes, and it gets dark, the figure is standing there again. By then, there's more cars coming from the Civic Center, so she runs to the opposite side of the bridge, and as the cars pass, she runs into the lanes of the oncoming cars. Thankfully, there were no other cars coming towards her. Right alongside the cars as they go over the bridge, and she starts to hear screaming sounds mixed with laughter. Now she starts running till she reaches the stoplight, but she says she had a feeling of something behind her, but she was too scared to look back. And by this time, there's almost no other cars passing either way, so even though the crosswalk was a red light, she ran across Omaha Street and runs the 2 blocks home. So that is one of the reasons my friend called me, because tonight after the powwow is over, her friend is going to need a ride home, and she was looking for a ride for her. She shared this with me. If I was still in town, I sure would have gave her a ride home. I really do hope she found a ride for her friend. I will never walk through that area at night. There's a lot of things in history, including killings, drownings, that happen in that area. And if you're from around here, you know exactly what I mean. You shouldn't listen to this at night, but if you do, go ahead and pray, smudge, light your sage. What I'm gonna tell you really happened, and I believe something dark was there with me that day. This isn't the scariest experience or story that I know, but it's the one that I was a part of, and I still think about it to this day. I worked in the past as an addiction counselor, and most of my clients share some very disturbing experiences. Addiction, in my view, tends to open people to portals and negativity. Addiction consumes a person to the point that all morals, self-respect, and even fate is broken. So I had a young lady come in for a session, and every single time we were done, I felt completely drained. I felt like I was in a boxing match. The trauma and the negativity she carried was just overwhelming, and she just continued to struggle with poor decisions. Seriously, I felt like inside of me there was a battle going on, to the point where I would actually get ready every time that we had an appointment. One day, she came in angry. Something about exposing one of her kids to a dangerous person. As we spoke, I could feel the air around me change, to the point where I could see a thin, light mist in the room. I rubbed my eyes as she started to vent, getting angry as well. It's at this point that I knew it, that something came with her. She even noticed my demeanor and whispered, "You feel it, right? Don't you?" This did scare me, but I kept my composure. As a professional, you must help your client and not quickly jump into possible delusions. I tried taking the conversation elsewhere, focused on other things, but the environment just got heavy, and at this point she was sobbing and desperate. I was able to calm and refocus her, talking about the positive things in her life. Then she stayed quiet and just stared at the wall behind me. I saw the fear in her eyes and her pupils expand. She was seeing something. I remained calm, trying not to upset her again. But that's when I felt a tug on my shoulder. When I did, her mouth dropped open, and she started screaming, "Did you see that?" I acted like nothing happened, and when there was another tug, this time with more force, I actually saw from the corner of my eye, my shirt lifting up on my shoulder. At this point, she just suddenly bolted out of the room. I did freak out a little bit, but I was able to compose myself and said a prayer. And just like that, I could feel it. The whole room change again, back to normal. It was scary now that I think about it. I did see this young lady for a few more weeks, but she just dropped out of treatment after getting into a negative relationship. The trauma and negativity can be caused by the drugs themselves. Addiction can take you to the darkest corners of this world. So be careful who you let into your life. Some people carry things that they don't even realize that are attached to them. Things that cling to broken spirits. They feed off of addiction, anger, emotions, and even grief. You never really know what someone is battling or what might be following them. Always protect yourself. I'm gonna tell you a secret, but I doubt anyone will ever know, or even find out, because I'm not gonna give you any names or places, at least not any real names. Growing up, I always knew my dad kept his distance from his side of the family. He never talked about them, never brought us around them. I never even got to meet anyone else from his side. The only family that I know are from my mom's side. As I got older, I did think about it, but I never said anything. It really didn't interest me. I never knew them, and if they wanted to know me, they would have came around. It wasn't until a few years ago, I'm 40 now by the way, my dad ended up in the hospital. He had some sort of health scare, and he decided to call me and tell me if I could meet with him to hang out. We did, of course, but as I was dropping him off, I remember he told me not to go around my cousin, Richie, or anybody else from his side. I did wonder who the fuck is Richie. That's when my dad said that Richie is my uncle, and he might come around. He said Richie is in jail at the moment, for life, but somehow he will try to reach out to me. He said that this all started back when their mom, as in my grandma, she was getting sick. So Richie and my dad would go over to her place, help her out, do whatever needed to be done. Clean, cook, check on her, that sort of thing. Afterwards, they would both head back to their own place. They came up with a routine and schedule of taking care of their own mom. Some weekends it would be a whole day thing, or even a whole weekend type of thing. At this time, my dad had just gotten married to my mom, but Richie, who was older, had already been married for about 5 years. Nobody had kids yet, so the schedule to keep their own mom was very doable. On one of those days, Richie came home, and he didn't find his wife home. She would be out and about, and she wouldn't come home until late, very late. At first it started slow, not really being at home. Sometimes she would be gone all day, especially on the days when Richie would be over at mom's home taking care of her. The weird thing is that Richie said every time that she came home, she smelled like the fat from a sheep. But she would always say something about visiting her mom or dad, and that she was over helping them around the house and such. And just like any normal person, Richie started to get curious. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Richie assumed that she was messing around, maybe with some slick talking, bootcut jeans, a wannabe city guy. He figured that she was out there getting sweet talk. But the weird thing was, unless she was cheating on him with a Navajo butcher, why was she smelling the way that she did? And so one night, weekend, Richie decided to finish with his mom earlier that evening, so he could come home and see if his wife was there. And this time she was, so he waited outside from a distance to see if anybody was inside their home, or if she left or anything. Eventually she came out, then he followed her. Mind you, it was basically dark by now, and he stayed a good distance behind so that she wouldn't notice. At least that's what my dad said. He followed her for a while, realizing that they were heading towards the mountains. She turned off the main road, and then took a dirt path that curved towards what looked like an old, abandoned hogan, out in the middle of nowhere. Instead of him turning behind her, Richie kept driving straight. A little further up the road, then he pulled off onto the side. He got out and went back on foot. As he got closer, abandoned and boarded up. That's what it seemed like since it was dark out there. He could see a small fire inside. He said something was going on. He walked up to a quote-unquote window and started looking through the boards. That's when he saw a group of people sitting around a small fire in the hogan. It was an older man, and there were 2 people sitting down in front of him. The older man was singing and singing, and then he draped something over the fire to where the hogan went dark. The older man must have known that Richie had been watching, because right after that, the other 2 that were there were now behind Richie, and they dragged him inside. That's when he saw her, his wife, sitting in the corner of the hogan. She was undressed. I won't go into what my dad said, because he said to never share this with anyone, since evil people are out here. Richie told my dad that several weeks after that, the old man would come around Richie's home, basically talk, and telling them that they needed to learn the songs, and learn them, and get them engraved into their head. And then he said that he was handed a knife that had been staining something, and that he knew what he had to do. Richie said his wife was excited, because now that the secret had been revealed, they could start going together. I know this sounds weird, but hear me out. There's a point in all this. Richie said that he knew what they were trying to get him to do. He hated what they were doing, and he also hated what his wife had become. And so he decided, well, he ended up killing his own wife. And that's the reason why he ended up in jail. And through a jail visit, that's where Richie told my dad everything. People say that Richie is crazy, but for some reason, I kind of do believe Richie. Scary as shit. My dad said that my grandma eventually passed away, not too long after Richie went to jail. Come to think about it, maybe it was his wife who was making Richie's mom sick the whole time. I'm not sure, but that's the story that my dad told me, and I have never forgotten it. What do you think about owls? bad luck, a bad omen? Is it a good thing if you see one? A shapeshifter. I had quite a few encounters with them, more than once. Well, my mom's family is mixed. We aren't that close with our indigenous family, simply because we live all the way in California, and they live in Oaxaca down in Mexico. But when I turned 15 years old, we went to go spend a month with them, with my grandpa and the rest of the family. My grandpa, he's a native guy. He is part of the Zapotecos community. For those who don't know, los Zapotecos viven en Oaxaca. The Zapotec people, they live in Oaxaca. Well, he's hunted all his life. He's also a really good tracker. So one day he decides he wants to take me hunting, even though I have never used a gun before. He shows me how to shoot before we leave, so that I'm not clueless. Like I said, my family is indigenous, and maybe that's hard for some people to understand, but being native doesn't mean Native American in the way that most people picture it. Our ancestors didn't belong to one country. There were never any lines separating us. There was no US, no Mexico, no Canada, just the land. And our tribes, they travel, they traded, and they share stories, medicine, bad and good, and even beliefs and everything else. So I want you to set aside the borders that you were taught to see. Think of North America as one big land with different states or tribes everywhere. That's how our people lived it. I may not fit your image of what a native person is, but I know where my roots and family come from. And this story I'm going to tell you digs into that. It has a lot to do with it. Some parts of it might sound familiar. Even if you're from a different tribe or some other place, that's the beauty of who we were before the world tried to split us up. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is because of what I'm about to share with you has to do with none other than owls. And I know you heard different things, depending on where you're from. Cuando el tecolote canta, el indio muere. When the owl sings, the Indian dies. That's a very popular saying down here in Mexico. In some places, they're called lechuzas, evil witches in disguise. Up north, some owls can be seen as messengers, omens, sometimes even protectors, but also warnings. Los Lakotas, Ojibwe, Chippewa, it really all depends on your people. But nosotros, but me, my people, we the Zapotec people, we believe that they are the messengers of death. Seeing one basically is a bad omen. It means that someone is gonna pass soon. So my grandparents would tell me stories about them, how when they used to see one out in the fields, they would try to chase it away, hoping to prevent the bad omen from actually happening. I'm terrified of them, not because of our beliefs. Like I said, I encountered quite a few, and both times I've been attacked by them. Once when I was a baby, and again when I was 10. I still have a huge scar on my scalp from one of them. Laugh all you want. So anyways, me and my grandpa go to El Monte, which also contained a bosque, basically out in the woods. Before we even got there, he had told me he wanted to show me my roots, what he had gone through and lived, everything about the land. You know how that whole speech goes, about remembering where you came from, not forgetting your blood, and how this land raised him harder than any man ever could. I just nodded like, yeah, I'm listening. We spent some time out there just walking and talking, mostly. He told me stories from when he was young like me. We would then stop and check for tracks. Surprisingly, we didn't find anything, nothing out there. After a while, my grandpa stood still for a moment. Then he looked up at the sky. I remember him saying, "Vámonos, let's head back before it starts to get dark." So we start walking back, not rushing or anything, just making sure we make it back home. About 5 or 10 minutes later, that's when we heard it. We both stopped at the same time. It sounded like a woman crying, maybe, but far away. But now that I think about it, it didn't sound like someone was sobbing. so I know it wasn't La Llorona. More like someone trying to breathe. Have you ever seen the movie Us? Well, it sounded like that lady, the one that talks all creepy. Like that, but even worse. Like I said, it sounded super far away, and it's kind of hard to explain, but you get the point. My grandpa then tells me to walk until I'm about 50 meters ahead of him, and to stop. He says it'll help us locate where the sound is coming from. I couldn't tell you how. I never gone hunting before, but I was nervous. But I was also a little bit excited, just because I was part of what's going on. I stopped when I figured I had gone far enough, and then I wait. Nothing. The noise doesn't come again. My grandpa then raised his hand in the distance, telling me to stay put, and then the sound comes again, that same crying, but it's closer now, or maybe louder, or both. My grandpa then walks up to me, quiet now, and my face goes from being excited to a bit nervous, because now I see his reaction is not the same as before. Plus, he doesn't say anything this time. We wait about 10 minutes and he's just looking around, and then he tells me to be quiet again, even though I hadn't said anything. Then, you see his whole demeanor change, back to normal. Great, whatever this damn animal is most likely gone now. He then tells me to keep walking, saying to walk another 50 meters. And so I do it. I start moving as quietly as I can. I then stop, and I can see my grandpa in the distance, signaling again to stay put. I look around, and that's when I notice a deep fog beginning to roll in. It's everywhere. At first it was just moving in, but I swear it happened so fast. It was getting thick. 1 second I could see ahead of me, and the next, nothing. Of course I semi-panic and yell out to my grandpa. He simply tells me to stay put. I then squat behind some bushes that were next to me. I glance back. I was expecting to see his outline behind me, but there's nothing. No movement. No sounds. Actually, except for that distant broken crying again. It sounded somewhere off to the left now, or maybe above. It was hard to tell. I whispered for my grandpa again. Nothing. Not even the crunch of leaves. Did my grandpa stay put as well? Now my whole body is telling me that something wasn't right. I didn't hear him walking at all. After a bit I called out again. No response. I wait there, but my grandpa still doesn't show up. It gets to the point where I'm starting to panic even more. And just then, my fucking luck, I hear it. The sound of wings flapping, louder than usual. An owl flies in. It's a small one, smaller than the ones that I've seen before. It startles the hell out of me. It lands on a nearby branch that I'm able to see above me. Now, remember, my fear of owls that I mentioned before. I'm starting to really freak out, and then I hear my grandpa's voice. He starts calling out my name. My panic and fear starts to fade away. I stand up and call out to him, but he doesn't respond. He just keeps calling my name. His voice is getting closer though. That's when I notice that the owl begins to move around on the branch, shifting from side to side, ready to attack me or something. Fuck. I'm about to get another scar or something. Then, it's my grandpa's voice. Again, closer. But then it hit me. His voice sounded different. Basically, I was feeling scared again. I decided to stay in the bushes, crouching down on the ground again. Grandpa's voice keeps getting closer. Not only that, it's different. Way off. I then see something darker moving towards me in the fog. But the fog is so dense that I can't tell what it is at first. Just that it's some kind of animal. I start to make out what it is. It's a woman. At least, I think it is. She's crawling on all fours, but not like a person. Her elbows are weird. Her back. Her hair is long, over her face. I could see the silhouette in the fog. She wasn't that far from me. At this point, I'm freaking out, and I start crying. As soon as I do, I guess she heard me, because she raised her head like a dog. She starts sniffing the air. Can she smell me? I tell myself. She then looks towards me now at this point. Then she looks at me. This lady, woman, or dog, or whatever, opens her mouth, and she calls out my name, but in the voice of my grandpa. Right away I think about shooting her, but I'm useless with a gun. I'm fumbling with it. My hands are shaking. She starts crawling towards me. I forgot to mention the owl had calmed down, but now it's making all sorts of noises. Screeching and flapping. Was this damn owl telling this she-horse demon, whatever it is, where I was at? Fuck. This woman is now a few feet in front of me, and she moves her head up towards the owl. Part of her hair goes to the side, and I can see her. This isn't no creature. This isn't a monster. She's blind. At least I assume, because her eyes are gray. But what scared me the most is that, in that moment, she was smiling up at the owl. Then, she calls my name again. The owl then stops making noise all at once, and turns its head to look at me. Suddenly, it dives down, and it begins to claw at the woman, biting her, scratching her, or whatever it was doing. She then starts screaming, wheezing, or something. Fuck this. That's enough for me. I take off running. I don't even know which way. All I know is that she's blind. I hear her wheezing, scratching, running. Was she fucking running now? And this woman is calling out my name. Of course, I fumble and trip. As I get up, I hear it. She's calling my name still, making that fucking horrible wheezing sound. I look back, and there she is. From what I remember now, the fog was clearing up a bit, because she seemed a bit further, except that now I could see her too. She also has the owl in her mouth. It looks dead. Suddenly, my grandpa starts jogging over to me and yells for me to stay on the ground. He shoots at the woman, 2 shots, and the woman got down on all fours and ran, crawled away, whatever it did. Grandpa then continues shooting, kneels down, and he puts his hand on my shoulder. I'm shaking, covered in sweat and dirt, but somehow I know we're fine now. Whatever the fuck that thing was, it's gone. For now. We walk over to where he shot it. Everything is still. The fog was getting thin. We see the dark puddles where the blood fell. Grandpa then stares at it for a long moment. Then he says, "That was no woman." He kneels down and picks up the body of the white owl. He turns it gently in his hands. Then he says, "This wasn't the body of an animal." I'm standing there trying to process everything, trying to slow my breathing. And then he says, "It was a relative, but he's gone now." I didn't ask any questions. I just nodded. I cried most of the way back home. Not to be dramatic or anything. Just kind of crying because of everything that just happened. When we got back, Grandpa told the rest of the family what happened. No one looked surprised or shocked. Everybody just started getting ready a little fire out in the back. They brought a bunch of things out, and some of Grandpa's old belongings from when he was young. They did a small ritual that night. Later on, my grandpa showed me a photograph of his brother. He kept it in some old drawer, wrapped in some cloth. The man in the picture looked a lot like Grandpa, but younger. Grandpa said that he believed it was him, the owl, who saved me. I didn't know what to say. I haven't been back to Oaxaca since all of this happened. I will say this now. I have mixed views on owls now. I'm still trying to figure everything out. Maybe there's some good ones out there. And maybe there's some bad ones too. Don't get me wrong. If I see an owl, I'll most likely still get scared. Especially at night. But maybe it's one of those things that where it all depends on the situation, the land, the timing, and maybe the spirit behind it. But what about that woman? But my grandpa did tell me it was not a creature or anything like that. He said it was actually a witch who made a deal with the devil. In exchange, she gave up her eyesight. What were you told about owls? Cuando el tecolote canta, el indio muere. When the owl sings, the Indian dies.